Welcome, fellow wanderer of the wasteland, to the corporate graveyard that stretches across America, like monuments to hubris and greed. Tonight, we explore the shadowy titans of industry whose boardroom decisions shaped the very apocalypse that consumed the world. From Vault-Tech's twisted experiments to Robco's digital dreams, from the energy giants who fueled wars to the pharmaceutical empires that commodified suffering, these are the stories of corporations that built tomorrow while destroying today. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let your mind drift as we traverse the ruins of capitalism together. Close your eyes when you're ready, and let the gentle rhythm of corporate rise and fall carry you into peaceful slumber. In the sprawling mythology of the Fallout universe, no entity looms larger or casts a longer shadow over the atomic wasteland than Vault-Tech Corporation. Founded in 2031, this seemingly benevolent organization positioned itself as humanity's savior, the corporate guardian angel that would shepherd civilization through nuclear fire into a bright tomorrow. Their blue and yellow logo became as recognizable as any religious symbol, plastered across advertisements that promised safety, security, and survival for those wise enough to purchase a spot in their underground sanctuaries. But Vault-Tech's true legacy extends far beyond the simple narrative of corporate benefactor. Their story is one of systematic deception, orchestrated on a scale so vast and intricate that it transforms the very concept of corporate malfeasance into something approaching cosmic horror. These were not merely businessmen seeking profit from fear, but architects of human suffering, who used the promise of salvation to conduct experiments that would make the most depraved dictatorships of history seem restrained by comparison. The corporation's origins trace back to the resource wars that consumed the early 21st century, when petroleum reserves dwindled and nations turned to increasingly desperate measures to secure the fossil fuels that powered their civilizations. As international tensions escalated and nuclear conflict seemed inevitable, government officials began seriously considering contingency plans for societal survival in the aftermath of atomic warfare. It was during this period of mounting crisis that Vault-Tech's founders recognized an unprecedented business opportunity disguised as patriotic duty. The initial public face of Vault-Tech emphasized engineering excellence and humanitarian concern. Their promotional materials featured clean-cut families descending into spotless underground facilities equipped with all the amenities of modern life. The vaults were marketed as temporary refuges where Americans could wait out the radioactive storms above ground before emerging to rebuild their nation stronger than before. The company's representatives spoke at congressional hearings with charts and graphs demonstrating their commitment to preserving not just lives but the American way of life itself. Behind this carefully constructed facade of corporate responsibility lay a partnership with the shadowy organization known as the Enclave, descendants of pre-war American political and industrial elites who had concluded that democracy and public welfare were obstacles to effective governance. The Enclave's vision of post-war America required extensive data about human behavior under extreme stress, information that could only be gathered through controlled experimentation on large populations over extended periods. Vault-Tech's underground facilities provided the perfect laboratories for such research. The true scope of Vault-Tech's experimental program becomes apparent only when examining the individual installations scattered across America, like nodes in a vast network of human testing facilities. Each vault was designed not as a genuine shelter, but as a carefully controlled environment where specific variables could be manipulated to generate data about social psychology, genetic inheritance, technological adaptation, and the limits of human endurance under various forms of systematic pressure. Vault 11 stands as perhaps the most chilling example of Vault-Tech's philosophical approach to human experimentation. Marketed to its residents as a standard survival shelter, the facility was actually designed to test democratic governance under impossible moral constraints. The Vault's hidden directive required its population to select one member for execution every year through democratic voting, with the alternative being the death of everyone in the facility through automated security systems. For decades, the residents of Vault 11 participated in this grotesque annual ritual, developing elaborate political structures and moral justifications for their participation in systematic murder. Campaigns were conducted, votes were cast, and neighbors selected neighbors to die, all while believing that their compliance with this horrific system was necessary for the survival of their community. The psychological records recovered from the vault reveal the gradual erosion of moral reasoning as residents convinced themselves that participation in institutionalized murder was a form of civic duty. The experiment continued until only 5 residents remained, at which point the surviving population finally chose mass suicide rather than continued participation in the selection process. Their final recorded messages reveal the dawning horror of individuals who realized they had been manipulated into becoming willing participants in their own dehumanization, transformed from ordinary Americans into components in a machine designed to study the corruption of democratic values under extreme duress. Vault 112 presents a different but equally disturbing example of Vault-Tech's experimental methodology. Disguised as a standard residential facility, this vault was actually equipped with advanced virtual reality technology that kept its residents trapped in elaborate simulations, while their bodies remained in suspended animation. The vault's overseer, a sadistic researcher named Dr. Stanislaus Braun, used the captive population as subjects for psychological experiments that lasted centuries. Within the virtual environment, Braun subjected his unwilling test subjects to repeated cycles of simulated life, death, and resurrection, manipulating their perceived realities to study responses to trauma, loss, and existential uncertainty. Residents experienced entire lifetimes in the simulation, forming relationships, pursuing careers, and raising families, only to have these experiences erased and reset according to Braun's experimental protocols. The psychological damage inflicted by this process was irreversible, creating individuals who could no longer distinguish between authentic experience and artificial manipulation. The virtual reality experiments conducted in Vault 112 represent perhaps the ultimate expression of Vault-Tech's corporate philosophy, the treatment of human consciousness itself as raw material for research and development. The residents were not merely imprisoned but transformed into living laboratories where the fundamental nature of human experience could be dissected, analyzed, and reconstructed according to scientific specifications, rather than ethical considerations. Vault 81 provides insight into Vault-Tech's medical experimentation programs, facilities that use the promise of advanced healthcare to conduct unauthorized research on captive populations. This particular vault was designed to study disease transmission and treatment efficacy by deliberately exposing residents to various pathogens while testing experimental cures. The vault's medical staff, believing they were participating in legitimate research that would benefit humanity, unknowingly served as administrators in programs that treated human beings as laboratory animals. The residents of Vault 81 were subjected to repeated exposure to engineered diseases, their responses monitored and recorded as they suffered through symptoms that could have been prevented or treated using existing medical knowledge. Children were deliberately infected with modified viruses to study immune system development, while elderly residents were used to test the limits of human endurance under various forms of biological stress. The medical records recovered from the facility document decades of systematic torture disguised as healthcare research. Vault 101 represents a different category of Vault tech experimentation, facilities designed to study isolation and social control rather than physical or psychological trauma. This vault was sealed permanently after the bombs fell, with residents told that the outside world remained too dangerous for surface exploration. Generations of vault dwellers lived and died, believing that they were the last remnants of human civilization, carefully maintaining their underground society while waiting for conditions above ground to improve sufficiently to allow their emergence. The isolation experiment conducted in Vault 101 was designed to study cultural preservation and evolution under extreme social constraints. Researchers wanted to understand how human societies would develop when cut off from external influences and forced to rely entirely on pre-existing knowledge and resources. The Vault's population served as an unwitting control group in a multi-generational study of social stagnation and cultural decay. The psychological impact of this isolation became apparent when Vault residents eventually discovered the truth about their situation. Many suffered complete mental breakdowns upon learning that their entire lives had been based on lies, that the world above ground had been habitable for decades while they remained imprisoned underground. Some residents chose to remain in the vault even after learning the truth, unable to psychologically adapt to the revelation that their sacrifice had been meaningless and their isolation unnecessary. The marketing campaigns that Vault Tech used to sell vault spaces to pre-war Americans represent masterpieces of manipulative advertising, psychological operations designed to exploit fear and social pressure to generate demand for their experimental facilities. The corporation's advertising department employed teams of psychologists and sociologists to craft messages that would resonate with specific demographic groups while obscuring the true nature of their underground installations. Middle-class suburban families were targeted with advertisements emphasizing the vault's role in preserving American values and lifestyle during temporary periods of international crisis. These ads featured wholesome imagery of nuclear families gathering around dinner tables in underground dining halls, suggesting that vault life would be essentially identical to surface existence with the added benefit of complete security from foreign threats. The implied message was that vault residents represented patriotic duty rather than desperate survival. Wealthy individuals and corporate executives received different marketing materials that emphasized the vault's potential as exclusive communities where America's leadership class could wait out global instability while maintaining their social and economic advantages. These advertisements suggested that vault spaces were limited commodities that would be allocated based on social value and financial contribution, creating artificial scarcity that drove up demand while ensuring that influential individuals would advocate for Vault Tech's projects within government circles. The corporation's sales representatives underwent extensive training in psychological manipulation techniques designed to overcome potential customers' rational objections to underground living. They were taught to identify and exploit specific fears and anxieties that would make vault residents seem not just attractive but necessary for survival. Sales materials included detailed scripts for handling common objections, psychological profiles of different customer types, and instructions for creating artificial urgency that would prompt immediate purchase decisions. The financial structure of Vault Tech's business model reveals the extent to which profit motive drove their experimental programs. The corporation charged enormous fees for Vault residents, pricing their services to maximize revenue, while maintaining the artificial exclusivity that made Vault spaces desirable to wealthy customers. The waiting lists for popular vault locations were carefully managed to create the impression that demand far exceeded supply, justifying premium pricing, while ensuring that experimental populations would consist of individuals from specific socioeconomic backgrounds. But the most disturbing aspect of Vault-Tech's pricing strategy was its integration with experimental design requirements. Different vaults charge different fees based not on construction costs or amenities, but on the nature of the experiments to be conducted. Facilities designed for particularly dangerous or traumatic research offered lower prices to attract desperate individuals who could not afford spaces in supposedly safer installations. This created a tiered system where economic status determined not just vault access, but the nature and severity of the experimentation to which residents would be subjected. The corporation's relationship with the federal government extended far beyond simple defense, contracting into areas that blur the distinction between corporate enterprise and state-sponsored research. Vault-Tech received massive subsidies, ostensibly intended to support civilian defense preparedness. But these funds were actually used to finance human experimentation programs that served the research agenda of shadow government organizations rather than genuine public safety needs. Government oversight of Vault-Tech operations was deliberately minimal and largely cosmetic, designed to provide bureaucratic cover rather than meaningful regulation. Congressional committees that supposedly monitored vault construction and operation were staffed with individuals who had financial interests in the program's continuation and expansion. Regulatory agencies responsible for ensuring compliance with safety and ethical standards were systematically compromised through revolving door employment practices that placed Vault-Tech executives in positions of regulatory authority. The integration between Vault-Tech and government intelligence agencies reached levels that transformed the corporation into what was essentially a privatized extension of the national security apparatus. Vault experiments were designed to generate data that would be useful for population control and social engineering in post-war America, information that would enable the Enclave to maintain power through scientific manipulation of survivor communities rather than traditional political processes. Post-war discovery of Vault-Tech facilities by wasteland survivors has provided a window into the corporation's true legacy, revealing the systematic nature of their experimental programs while documenting the long-term consequences of their research. Vault dwellers who emerged into the post-apocalyptic world carried with them not just survival skills, but psychological trauma that shaped their interactions with surface communities and influenced the development of post-war civilization. Many Vault experiments continued operating automatically for decades after the Great War, their computerized systems maintaining experimental protocols even when human oversight had ceased to exist. These automated facilities became surreal monuments to corporate planning, underground cities where machines continued implementing research programs designed by individuals who had died centuries earlier. Wanderers exploring these installations found evidence of experiments that had continued for generations without any human awareness of their purpose or results. The psychological impact of Vault experimentation extended far beyond the direct victims to influence broader patterns of post-war social development. Communities established by Vault refugees often exhibited unusual social structures and behavioral patterns that reflected their underground origins, creating pockets of civilization that bore the permanent imprint of Vault-Tech's experimental programming. These communities became inadvertent test cases for studying the long-term transmission of trauma across generations. The discovery of Vault-Tech's experimental records by post-war researchers and faction leaders provided crucial intelligence about pre-war corporate and government operations, while raising disturbing questions about the gained continuity of institutional power across the nuclear divide. Organizations like the Brotherhood of Steel and the Institute incorporated Vault technology into their own operations, effectively continuing Vault-Tech's research program under different ideological frameworks. The corporation's legacy also manifests in the widespread distribution of vault technology throughout the wasteland, equipment, and infrastructure that continues to shape post-war civilization long after its creators' deaths. Pit-boys, vault suits, and underground construction techniques became standard elements of wasteland culture, technological inheritances that carry within them the assumptions and values of their corporate creators. Perhaps most troubling is the evidence that some vault experiments achieved their intended goals, generating data that proved useful for subsequent attempts at social control and population management by post-war organizations. The Enclave's continued existence and their sophisticated understanding of population psychology suggests that Vault-Tech's research programs provided valuable intelligence about human behavior that enabled effective manipulation of post-war communities. The ethical implications of Vault-Tech's operations extend beyond simple questions of corporate responsibility into fundamental concerns about the nature of consent, the limits of scientific inquiry, and the relationship between individual rights and collective survival. The corporation's executives genuinely believed that their experimental programs served humanity's long-term interests by generating knowledge that would enable more effective post-war reconstruction, but their utilitarian calculations treated individual lives as expendable resources rather than inherently valuable entities. The psychological profiles of Vault-Tech leadership reveal individuals who had convinced themselves that their participation in systematic human experimentation was justified by the magnitude of the crisis facing human civilization. They viewed themselves as pragmatic visionaries, willing to make difficult decisions that more sentimental individuals could not contemplate. Heroic figures who sacrificed their own moral comfort for the greater good of scientific progress. But this self-perception obscures the extent to which Vault-Tech's experimental programs reflected broader cultural assumptions about human nature, scientific authority, and the appropriate relationship between corporate power and individual rights. The corporation's activities were not aberrations but logical extensions of pre-war American values taken to their ultimate conclusions, revealing the potential for democratic societies to evolve into systems of organized oppression when crisis creates opportunities for concentrated power. The story of Vault-Tech Corporation stands as perhaps the most comprehensive indictment of unregulated corporate power in the Fallout universe, demonstrating how profit-seeking enterprises can transform survival itself into a commodity to be bought, sold, and manipulated for experimental purposes. Their underground laboratories became monuments to the principle that human beings exist primarily as resources to be exploited rather than individuals deserving protection and respect. As we reflect on Vault-Tech's legacy while drifting towards sleep, we might consider how their story illuminates the dangers of trusting survival to institutions whose primary loyalty lies not with those they claim to protect, but with abstract goals that reduce human experience to data points in elaborate research programs. The corporation's blue and yellow logo, once a symbol of hope and security, ultimately became a warning about the ease with which noble intentions can be corrupted by power and the terrible consequences that result when corporate efficiency is applied to the fundamental questions of human existence. In the quiet darkness of night, as consciousness fades and rational analysis gives way to dream, perhaps we can find some measure of peace in knowing that even the most comprehensive systems of control eventually crumble, leaving behind only scattered evidence of their ambitions and the enduring resilience of those they sought to manipulate. The vault doors that once sealed entire populations in underground prisons now stand open, and the wasteland wind carries away the last traces of corporate hubris that once believed it could engineer human nature itself. In the pantheon of pre-war corporate titans, few figures loom as large or cast shadows as complex as Robert Edwin House, the visionary industrialist whose Robco Industries transformed from a modest electronics manufacturer into the technological backbone of American civilization. Founded in 2042, Robco emerged during the height of the resource wars, as nations across the globe scrambled to secure the materials and energy sources necessary to sustain their increasingly desperate societies. But where other corporations focused on extraction and exploitation, House pursued a different path, one that would ultimately reshape the very nature of human-machine interaction and establish the foundation for a digital empire that would outlast the civilization that created it. Robert House was not merely an entrepreneur, but a prophet of technological integration. A man whose understanding of computing systems and artificial intelligence exceeded that of his contemporaries by decades. His background combined formal engineering education with an intuitive grasp of human psychology that enabled him to design products that satisfied needs customers did not yet realize they possessed. Unlike the corporate executives who populated other major industries, House approached business as an intellectual exercise, a complex puzzle involving technological capability, market dynamics, and social engineering that could be solved through careful analysis and strategic implementation. The early years of Robco Industries were characterized by rapid expansion and aggressive acquisition of smaller technology companies, a corporate strategy that reflected House's understanding that technological dominance required control over entire supply chains rather than mere excellence in individual product categories. By 2050, Robco had established manufacturing facilities across the American Southwest, research laboratories in major university cities, and distribution networks that extended into every sector of the national economy. The company's logo became as recognizable as any government seal, a symbol of technological sophistication that conveyed both promise and subtle intimidation. The Pip-Boy personal information processor represents perhaps Robco's most enduring contribution to pre-war American life, a wearable computing device that integrated health monitoring, communication capabilities, and data storage into a single unit small enough to be worn on the wrist. The development of the Pip-Boy required advances in miniaturization, battery technology, and user interface design that positioned Robco years ahead of its competitors in multiple technological domains. But more importantly, the Pip-Boy established a new paradigm for human-computer interaction, one that assumed constant connectivity and continuous data collection as normal aspects of daily existence. The marketing campaign for the Pip-Boy emphasized personal empowerment and individual optimization, promising users the ability to monitor and improve every aspect of their physical and social performance through continuous quantified feedback. Advertisements featured attractive young professionals whose Pip-Boys helped them achieve career success, maintain perfect health, and navigate complex social situations with confidence and precision. The implicit message was that human intelligence and intuition were insufficient tools for modern life, requiring technological augmentation to achieve optimal results. But beneath this consumer-friendly exterior lay surveillance and data collection capabilities that transformed every Pip-Boy user into a node in Robco's vast information gathering network. The devices transmitted detailed biometric data, location information, and behavioral patterns to corporate servers, creating comprehensive psychological profiles that enabled targeted manipulation of user behavior through carefully crafted software updates and interface modifications. House understood that information represented the ultimate form of power, more valuable than financial resources or physical assets because it enabled prediction and control of human decision-making processes. The Protectron security robot emerged from Robco's defense contracting division, a product line that capitalized on growing concerns about civil unrest and foreign infiltration during the resource wars. These bipedal automatons were marketed to businesses, government agencies, and wealthy individuals as cost-effective alternatives to human security personnel, offering 24-hour vigilance without the complications of wages, benefits, or moral qualms about the use of force. The Protectron's distinctive design, with its cylindrical torso and glowing optical sensors, became a familiar sight in corporate lobbies, government buildings, and exclusive residential complexes across America. The psychological impact of widespread Protectron deployment extended far beyond their immediate security functions, normalizing the presence of armed robots in civilian environments, while conditioning the population to accept constant mechanical surveillance as a necessary component of modern life. Citizens gradually adapted their behavior to avoid triggering Protectron threat assessment protocols, self-censoring conversations, and modifying movement patterns to conform to algorithmic definitions of non-threatening activity. This behavioral conditioning represented a form of social control more effective than traditional law enforcement because it operated through internalized compliance rather than external coercion. Robco's terminal systems revolutionized information access and storage throughout American society, providing the computational infrastructure that supported everything from banking networks to military communications. These computer terminals, with their distinctive green on black displays and robust construction, became the primary interface between humans and the increasingly complex data systems that managed modern civilization. Banks, hospitals, schools, and government offices installed Robco terminals as essential equipment for conducting business in an information-driven economy. The standardization of terminal interfaces across multiple sectors created unprecedented opportunities for data integration and cross-reference analysis, enabling Robco to construct detailed maps of American society that revealed patterns invisible to traditional research methods. Financial transactions, medical records, educational achievements, and employment histories could be correlated to identify individuals with specific characteristics or predict behavioral trends with remarkable accuracy. This comprehensive surveillance capability provided House with intelligence that rival corporations and government agencies could only dream of accessing. But perhaps most significantly, Robco's terminal network established the technological foundation for House's ultimate project, the transformation of Las Vegas into a digitally controlled city-state that would survive the nuclear apocalypse and serve as the nucleus for post-war American reconstruction. The computational power required to coordinate the complex systems that would preserve New Vegas demanded integration of thousands of individual terminals into a unified network capable of real-time analysis and response to changing conditions. The Securitron Mark I military robot represented the pinnacle of Robco's pre-war engineering capabilities, a sophisticated weapons platform that combined advanced artificial intelligence with devastating firepower in a package designed for urban pacification and crowd control. Unlike the relatively simple Protectron units intended for basic security tasks, Securitrons possessed complex behavioral programming that enabled them to assess threats, negotiate with hostile individuals, and apply graduated responses ranging from verbal warnings to lethal force with minimal human oversight. The development of Securitron artificial intelligence required advances in machine learning and behavioral modeling that pushed the boundaries of pre-war computing technology, creating digital minds capable of making complex tactical decisions while remaining absolutely loyal to their programmed objectives. These artificial intelligences could analyze facial expressions, voice patterns, and body language to determine individual emotional states and predict likely behavioral responses, enabling them to manipulate human psychology with scientific precision. House's personal involvement in Securitron development reflected his understanding that post-war reconstruction would require absolute control over human populations that might resist centralized authority or rational resource allocation. The Securitrons were designed not merely as weapons but as instruments of social engineering, capable of maintaining order while gradually conditioning survivor communities to accept technological governance as superior to democratic decision-making processes. The prediction of nuclear war that drove House's preparations for post-apocalyptic survival was not the result of intelligence leaks or insider information, but rather the logical conclusion of systematic analysis of global resource flows, political tensions, and technological capabilities. House's mathematical models indicated that nuclear conflict was not merely possible but inevitable, given the competitive dynamics that drove international relations during the resource wars. His calculations suggested that nuclear exchange would occur within a specific time frame, enabling him to prepare Las Vegas for survival while his competitors remained focused on short-term profit maximization. The construction of New Vegas's defense systems required modifications to Robco's existing product lines that transformed civilian technologies into instruments of military protection, demonstrating the inherent dual-use nature of advanced automation systems. Securitrons were upgraded with enhanced armor and weapons systems. Computer terminals were hardened against electromagnetic pulse effects, and communication networks were redesigned to function independently of national infrastructure. These preparations created a technological island capable of maintaining sophisticated civilization, while the surrounding world descended into barbarism. House's decision to preserve himself through life support technology, rather than accepting natural death, represented the ultimate expression of his faith in technological solutions to human limitations, but it also marked his transformation from human entrepreneur to something approaching a digital deity. The Mr. House who survived the nuclear apocalypse was no longer entirely human, his consciousness interfacing with computer systems in ways that enhanced his intellectual capabilities while severing his emotional connections to ordinary human experience. The post-war Las Vegas that emerged under House's rule demonstrated both the potential and the perils of technocratic governance, creating a stable and prosperous society through methods that would have been considered tyrannical by pre-war democratic standards. The Strip became a showcase for the efficiency that could be achieved when human irrationality was eliminated from decision-making processes, but it also revealed the sterility and moral emptiness that resulted when technological optimization became the primary value guiding social organization. The Securitron army that enforced House's rule in New Vegas represented the fulfillment of his pre-war vision for automated law enforcement, creating a security apparatus that could maintain perfect order without the corruption, fatigue, or moral qualms that limited human police forces. These mechanical enforcers patrolled the Strip with mathematical precision, their behavioral algorithms calibrated to maintain the delicate balance between freedom and control that enabled the casino economy to function while preventing the chaos that characterized most post-war settlements. But the psychological impact of living under constant robotic surveillance created subtle forms of social dysfunction that House's analytical models had not anticipated, generating behavioral patterns and cultural adaptations that reflected the inherent unnaturalness of human-machine hierarchies. Strip residents developed complex strategies for interacting with Securitrons, learning to modulate their speech patterns and body language to avoid triggering automated threat responses while maintaining the appearance of voluntary compliance with House's regulations. The economic model that sustained New Vegas under House's leadership relied heavily on the technological advantages provided by Robco's pre-war innovations, particularly the ability to maintain complex systems through automated processes that required minimal human intervention. The casinos operated with machine-like efficiency, their every function optimized for profit generation, while providing just enough genuine entertainment to maintain customer satisfaction. This balance between exploitation and service reflected House's understanding that sustainable economic relationships required the illusion of mutual benefit, even when power dynamics were fundamentally unequal. The broader implications of House's success in New Vegas extended far beyond the immediate boundaries of his city-state, demonstrating that technological sufficiency could enable small-scale reconstruction of pre-war living standards while raising disturbing questions about the compatibility between human nature and machine logic. The Strip's prosperity attracted visitors from across the wasteland, exposing them to House's vision of technologically mediated civilization while serving as a recruitment tool for his long-term plans for regional expansion. House's relationship with the various factions that competed for control of the Mojave wasteland revealed both his tactical brilliance and his fundamental inability to understand human motivations that did not conform to rational, self-interest calculations. His negotiations with the New California Republic, Caesar's Legion, and other power groups were conducted with mathematical precision, but they often failed to account for ideological commitments and emotional factors that influenced decision-making in ways that pure logic could not predict or manipulate. The technological infrastructure that supported House's operations in New Vegas represented a unique hybrid of pre-war automation and post-war adaptation, creating systems that combined the sophistication of advanced artificial intelligence with the resourcefulness required for survival in a damaged world. Robco's robots were modified with salvaged components and jury-rigged repairs, while computer networks incorporated communication protocols developed through decades of isolation and experimentation. The knowledge preservation efforts that House maintained throughout his post-war existence reflected his understanding that technological civilization required not just functional equipment, but also the intellectual traditions that enabled continued innovation and development. His libraries contained comprehensive archives of pre-war scientific and technical knowledge, while his computer systems stored detailed documentation of Robco's manufacturing processes and design principles. This information represented a treasure trove of human achievement that would be invaluable for future reconstruction efforts. But House's approach to knowledge preservation was selective and self-serving, emphasizing technological and economic information, while neglecting cultural and artistic traditions that he considered irrelevant to post-war survival. His archives contained detailed specifications for robot construction and computer programming, but relatively little poetry, music, or philosophical reflection. This narrow focus reflected his belief that human civilization's primary value lay in its technological achievements rather than its exploration of meaning and beauty. The psychological profile that emerges from House's post-war behavior reveals an individual whose prolonged isolation and technological augmentation had fundamentally altered his relationship to human experience, creating a being that retained human intelligence while losing access to the emotional and social connections that normally constrain the exercise of power. His decisions regarding New Vegas were made with perfect logical consistency, but often seemed to ignore considerations of human dignity and individual autonomy that most people would consider morally essential. The legacy of Robco Industries in the post-war world extends far beyond House's personal empire to encompass the thousands of robots, computers, and automated systems that continued operating across the wasteland long after their creators' deaths. These technological artifacts became integral components of post-war civilization, providing survivors with capabilities they could not reproduce while creating dependencies that shaped the development of emerging societies in profound and often problematic ways. The ethical questions raised by Robco's pre-war activities and House's post-war rule touch on fundamental issues about the appropriate relationship between human beings and the technological systems they create, particularly when those systems achieve sufficient sophistication to make autonomous decisions about human welfare. The benefits provided by Robco's innovations were undeniable, but they came at the cost of privacy, autonomy, and democratic participation in decisions affecting individual and community life. The corporate culture that House fostered at Robco emphasized intellectual excellence and technological achievement, while maintaining strict hierarchical control over information and decision-making authority, creating an organizational model that reflected his personal values, while serving as a prototype for the technocratic governance he would later implement in New Vegas. Employees were expected to demonstrate not just technical competence, but also absolute loyalty to corporate objectives, regardless of personal moral reservations about the applications of their work. The research and development programs that drove Robco's technological advancement were conducted with minimal external oversight or ethical review, enabling the company to pursue projects that other organizations might have considered too dangerous or morally questionable. House's personal authority within the corporation was absolute, allowing him to direct resources toward long-term projects that served his vision for post-war reconstruction rather than immediate commercial objectives. The integration of Robco's technologies into American society created feedback loops that accelerated the adoption of automated systems while reducing opportunities for human skill development and autonomous decision-making, generating cultural changes that made populations more dependent on technological assistance while less capable of independent critical thinking. These changes served House's interests by creating markets for Robco's products while conditioning consumers to accept technological authority as legitimate and beneficial. As we reflect on House's extraordinary journey from pre-war industrialist to post-war digital sovereign, we encounter profound questions about the nature of human leadership, the role of technology in social organization, and the ultimate compatibility between individual freedom and systematic efficiency. His story demonstrates both the remarkable achievements that become possible when brilliant individuals are given unlimited resources and authority, and the disturbing consequences that result when such power is exercised without meaningful accountability or moral constraint. In the gentle quiet of approaching sleep, perhaps we can find some measure of wonder in House's technological achievements while remaining mindful of the human costs that enabled their implementation, recognizing that the robots and computers that populate the Fallout universe represent not just fascinating gadgets, but embodiments of particular assumptions about human nature, social organization, and the proper relationship between creators and their creations that continue to shape our understanding of progress and civilization. In the sprawling landscape of corporate malfeasance that characterized pre-war America, few organizations combined scientific brilliance with moral bankruptcy as comprehensively as West Tech Research Facility. Founded in 2002 during the early stages of what would become known as the Resource Wars, this military-industrial complex represented the ultimate fusion of academic research excellence with Defense Department funding, creating an institution capable of pursuing technological advancement without the ethical constraints that traditionally limited scientific inquiry. West Tech's laboratories became crucibles where the fundamental nature of human biology, physics, and warfare could be reimagined according to principles that prioritize tactical advantage over humanitarian consideration. The corporation's origins traced back to a consortium of university researchers and defense contractors who recognized that the escalating international tensions over dwindling petroleum reserves would create unprecedented demand for battery military innovation. Unlike traditional weapons manufacturers who focused on incremental improvements to existing systems, Westtech's founders envisioned revolutionary breakthroughs that would fundamentally alter the nature of warfare itself. Their vision extended beyond mere technological superiority to encompass the biological and physical enhancement of human soldiers, transforming individual warriors into superhuman weapons platforms capable of decisive battlefield advantage. The early years of Westtech's operations were characterized by aggressive recruitment of the most brilliant minds from America's premier research institutions, offering compensation packages and research budgets that made academic positions seem almost charitable by comparison. Theoretical physicists, molecular biologists, materials scientists, and weapons engineers were assembled into interdisciplinary teams that could approach military challenges from multiple angles simultaneously. This concentration of intellectual talent created an environment where seemingly impossible technological goals became achievable through systematic application of scientific method and unlimited financial resources. The development of power armor represents perhaps Westtech's most visible and enduring contribution to pre-war military capability, though the full implications of this technology extended far beyond simple battlefield protection. The T-series power armor that emerged from Westtech laboratories represented a complete reimagining of infantry warfare, transforming individual soldiers into walking tanks capable of carrying weapons and equipment loads that would have required entire squads to operate effectively. But more significantly, power armor technology established new paradigms for human-machine integration that would influence post-war civilization in ways that its creators never anticipated. The research and development process that produced functional power armor required advances in multiple technological domains simultaneously, creating innovations that had applications far beyond military use. Miniaturized fusion power systems, advanced servo motors, integrated communication networks, and sophisticated life support systems were all developed as components of the Power Armor project. But each of these technologies possessed civilian applications that could have revolutionized American society if they had been developed and deployed for peaceful purposes rather than military advantage. The psychological impact of power armor on both its operators and their opponents represented a form of warfare that transcended physical destruction to encompass the systematic demoralization of enemy forces. Soldiers equipped with T-51 power armor moved across battlefields like mechanized gods, their enhanced strength and near invulnerability, creating tactical situations that conventional military doctrine was inadequate to address. Enemy forces found themselves facing opponents who could absorb tremendous amounts of damage while delivering devastating firepower, creating psychological trauma that often proved more effective than direct combat casualties. But the true genius of Westtech's power armor program lay not in its immediate military applications, but in its role as a testing platform for human-machine interface technologies that would enable even more radical forms of PlaySen, human enhancement. The control systems that translated human neural impulses into mechanical action provided crucial data about the limits and possibilities of direct brain-computer interaction, research that would prove invaluable for subsequent projects involving biological modification and artificial intelligence integration. The laser weapons program that emerged from Westtech's Energy Research Division represented another revolutionary breakthrough that fundamentally altered the nature of battlefield engagement. Unlike conventional firearms that relied on chemical propellants to accelerate physical projectiles, laser weapons generated coherent energy beams capable of instant target engagement across substantial distances. The development of practical laser weapons required advances in power generation, beam focusing, and thermal management that pushed the boundaries of pre-war engineering capabilities while creating technologies with enormous potential for civilian applications. The tactical advantages provided by laser weapons extended beyond their obvious destructive capabilities to include psychological and logistical benefits that traditional weapons could not match. Laser weapons produced no recoil, required no ammunition in the conventional sense, and could engage multiple targets with minimal delay between shots. These characteristics made them ideal for power armor integration, creating weapon systems that could deliver sustained, accurate fire while maintaining the mobility and protection that made power armor so effective. But the energy requirements for practical laser weapons necessitated the development of more efficient power generation and storage systems, research that contributed to advances in fusion technology and battery design that had implications far beyond military applications. The miniaturized fusion cells that powered laser weapons represented breakthrough achievements in clean energy technology that could have transformed civilian power generation if they had been developed for peaceful purposes rather than military destruction. The Forced Evolutionary Virus Project represents West Tech's most ambitious and ultimately catastrophic attempt to transcend the biological limitations that constrained human military effectiveness. Conceived as a method for creating super soldiers who would possess enhanced strength, intelligence, and resilience, while remaining fundamentally human in psychology and loyalty, the FEV research program instead created one of the most persistent and dangerous threats that would plague post-war America for generations. The virus that was intended to perfect humanity instead transformed it into something monstrous and barely recognizable. The scientific rationale behind the FEV project reflected the military's growing recognition that conventional human soldiers, even when equipped with advanced weapons and armor, remained vulnerable to biological and psychological limitations that could not be overcome through external technological enhancement. Fear, fatigue, disease, and moral qualms about killing represented fundamental constraints on military effectiveness that could only be addressed through direct modification of human biology and psychology. The goal was to create soldiers who retained human intelligence and creativity while possessing superhuman physical capabilities and absolute psychological reliability. The early stages of FEV research focused on understanding the genetic and biochemical mechanisms that regulated human growth, intelligence, and aggression. West Tech's biologists identified specific genetic sequences and hormonal pathways that could be modified to enhance desired characteristics while suppressing traits that limited military effectiveness. The research required extensive experimentation on human subjects, testing that was justified through national security arguments and conducted with minimal oversight from ethics review boards that had been systematically compromised through financial and political pressure. The transformation of human test subjects through FEV exposure revealed both the potential and the horror of biological warfare research conducted without adequate understanding of complex genetic interactions. Early test subjects demonstrated remarkable increases in physical strength, endurance, and pain tolerance, appearing to validate the theoretical foundations of the enhancement program. But these improvements came at the cost of severe psychological instability, cognitive degradation, and physical mutations that transformed subjects into creatures that could no longer be considered human in any meaningful sense. The super mutants that resulted from FEV experimentation represented the ultimate failure of reductionist approaches to human enhancement, demonstrating that consciousness and identity could not be preserved when biological systems were subjected to radical modification. The creatures that emerged from West Tech laboratories retained fragments of human memory and intelligence, but expressed these capabilities through behavioral patterns that were fundamentally alien to normal human experience. They possessed enormous physical strength and virtual immunity to radiation damage, but they had lost the capacity for emotional connection, creative thinking, and moral reasoning that defined human nature. The psychological profiles of super mutants revealed beings that experienced existence as a constant state of confusion and rage. Their enhanced physical capabilities channeled through cognitive structures that could no longer process complex social information or maintain coherent personal identity. They retained sufficient intelligence to use tools and weapons effectively, but they had lost the capacity for empathy, cooperation, and long-term planning that enabled human societies to function. The result was a population of extremely dangerous individuals who posed an existential threat to any human communities they encountered. The spread of super mutants throughout post-war America represented one of the most enduring consequences of West Tech's research programs, creating populations of hostile beings that would threaten human recovery efforts for generations. Unlike radiation or environmental contamination that could eventually be cleaned up or neutralized, super mutants represented self-sustaining biological weapons that could reproduce their condition through exposure of additional human victims to FEV variants that continued to circulate in contaminated environments. The Mariposa military base, where much of West Tech's FEV research was conducted, became a monument to the dangers of uncontrolled biological experimentation, a facility so contaminated with viral agents and radioactive materials that it remained hazardous for decades after the Great War. The base's underground laboratories contained evidence of research programs that violated every principle of scientific ethics, documenting systematic torture and murder disguised as medical research, while revealing the extent to which military necessity had been used to justify unspeakable atrocities. The records recovered from Mariposa revealed research protocols that treated human beings as experimental materials rather than individuals deserving moral consideration, documenting procedures that would have been considered war crimes if they had been conducted by enemy nations rather than American military contractors. Test subjects were deliberately exposed to lethal doses of experimental viruses, their responses monitored and recorded as they underwent biological transformations that destroyed their humanity while providing data about viral effectiveness and transmission mechanisms. The scientific methodology employed in FEV research reflected broader problems with military-sponsored biological research that prioritized rapid results over careful analysis of long-term consequences. The pressure to produce battlefield-ready enhancements within compressed timeframes led researchers to skip safety protocols and ethical reviews that might have identified the catastrophic risks associated with viral modification of human genetics. The result was a research program that achieved impressive short-term technological breakthroughs while creating biological disasters that would persist for centuries. The environmental contamination that resulted from FEV research extended far beyond the immediate vicinity of West Tech facilities to encompass entire regional ecosystems that were transformed through exposure to experimental viral agents. Plants and animals in areas surrounding research installations underwent mutations that created new species while eliminating existing ones, generating ecological changes that made large areas of the American landscape unsuitable for human habitation, even decades after the initial contamination occurred. The glow as the ruins of West Tech's primary research facility came to be known by post-war survivors, represented perhaps the most radiologically dangerous location in the entire American wasteland. The facility's destruction during the Great War had dispersed radioactive materials and experimental biological agents across a wide area, creating environmental conditions that remained lethal to most forms of life long after the initial nuclear exchange. The site became a pilgrimage destination for members of the Brotherhood of Steel and other organizations seeking to recover pre-war technology, but expeditions to the glow required extensive preparation and carried enormous risks of radiation exposure and viral infection. The technology that could be salvaged from West Tech facilities represented some of the most advanced scientific achievements of pre-war America, but much of this knowledge remained too dangerous to use safely without extensive modification and safety protocols. Power armor specifications could be adapted for post-war manufacturing, but laser weapons required energy sources and maintenance procedures that were difficult to reproduce in wasteland conditions. Most problematically, the biological research data that represented West Tech's most significant scientific breakthroughs also contained information that could be used to create new biological weapons or enhance existing super mutant populations in ways that would make them even more dangerous. The ethical questions raised by West Tech's research programs extended beyond simple condemnation of human experimentation to encompass fundamental issues about the relationship between scientific knowledge and moral responsibility. The researchers who conducted FEV experiments possessed genuine expertise and achieved remarkable scientific breakthroughs, but they pursued these achievements through methods that violated basic principles of human dignity and individual rights. Their work demonstrated that scientific capability, without ethical constraint, could produce results that were ultimately more destructive than beneficial to human welfare. The corporate culture that enabled West Tech's atrocities reflected broader problems with military-industrial complex organizations that prioritized mission accomplishment over individual accountability or moral reflection. Researchers were encouraged to focus on technical challenges while leaving ethical considerations to administrators and oversight bodies that were systematically compromised through financial and political pressure. This division of responsibility created environments where brilliant individuals could participate in horrific projects while maintaining psychological distance from the consequences of their work. The psychological profiles of West Tech researchers reveal individuals who had convinced themselves that their participation in biological weapons research was justified by national security concerns and the potential for scientific advancement. They viewed themselves as patriots and pioneers who were willing to pursue difficult research that less dedicated individuals would avoid. Heroic figures who accepted moral compromises in service of larger goals that transcended individual comfort or ethical purity. But this self-perception obscured the extent to which West Tech's research programs reflected broader cultural assumptions about the appropriate limits of scientific inquiry and the value of human life when weighed against technological advancement. The corporation's activities were not aberrations, but logical extensions of pre-war American values taken to their ultimate conclusions, revealing how democratic societies could evolve into systems of organized experimentation when military necessity created opportunities for concentrated power to override traditional ethical constraints. The post-war discovery of West Tech research facilities by wasteland survivors provided crucial intelligence about pre-war biological weapons programs, while raising disturbing questions about the continuity of dangerous research across the nuclear divide. Organizations like the Enclave and the Institute incorporated West Tech's research into their own programs, effectively continuing biological enhancement projects under different ideological frameworks while pursuing goals that differed more in scope than in fundamental methodology. The super mutant populations that continued to threaten post-war communities represented living monuments to West Tech's research legacy, biological weapons that had achieved a form of immortality through their virtual immunity to aging and disease. These creatures carried within their mutated genetics the accumulated knowledge of decades of biological research, making them valuable subjects for further experimentation while presenting constant dangers to human survival and recovery efforts. The weapons and armor that West Tech developed for military use became crucial resources for post-war survival, providing wasteland communities with defensive capabilities that would have been impossible to achieve through post-war manufacturing. Power armor enabled small groups of individuals to challenge much larger forces, while laser weapons provided reliable firepower that did not depend on increasingly scarce ammunition supplies. But the use of West Tech technology also created dependencies that shaped post-war political development in ways that reflected pre-war military priorities rather than civilian needs. The knowledge preservation efforts that various post-war organizations conducted in West Tech facilities focused primarily on technological and military applications, while neglecting the scientific methodology and ethical frameworks that might have prevented future repetitions of biological weapons disaster. The result was inheritance of West Tech's capabilities without understanding of the moral constraints that should have governed their use, creating conditions for new atrocities conducted with pre-war technology but post-war desperation. As we reflect on West Tech's legacy in the quiet moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about the relationship between scientific knowledge and human welfare, the appropriate limits of military research, and the long-term consequences that result when brilliant individuals pursue technological advancement without adequate ethical oversight or public accountability. Their story demonstrates how quickly noble goals like national defense and human enhancement can be corrupted when research is conducted in environments that prioritize results over methods and treat human beings as raw materials for experimentation rather than individuals deserving protection and respect. In the gentle darkness of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of peace in knowing that even the most sophisticated weapons eventually become obsolete, while the human capacity for moral learning and ethical growth continues to evolve, though the mutated creatures that wander the wastelands serve as permanent reminders of the prices that must be paid when scientific capability advances faster than moral wisdom, creating legacies of suffering that persist long after their creators have turned to dust beneath the unforgiving desert Sunday. Among the corporate titans that shaped pre-war America's descent into resource-driven madness, none played a more central role in precipitating the Great War than Poseidon Energy, the sprawling conglomerate that transformed from a regional oil company into the beating heart of America's energy infrastructure during the most critical decades of the 21st century. Founded during the early stages of global petroleum depletion, Poseidon Energy emerged as both beneficiary and architect of the resource scarcity that would ultimately consume civilization in nuclear fire, demonstrating how corporate entities could profit enormously from the very crises they helped create and perpetuate. The corporation's origins traced back to the consolidation movement that swept through American energy markets as easily accessible petroleum reserves began showing signs of depletion in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. What began as a modest oil extraction company operating in the American Southwest gradually expanded through aggressive acquisition and political manipulation to become the dominant force in multiple energy sectors simultaneously. Poseidon's growth strategy reflected a sophisticated understanding that energy scarcity would create opportunities for unprecedented profits if market conditions could be properly managed and manipulated. Unlike traditional energy companies that focus primarily on extraction and distribution, Poseidon Energy pursued vertical integration across the entire energy production chain, from resource exploration through final consumer delivery. This comprehensive approach enabled the corporation to control pricing at every stage of energy production, while eliminating competition through systematic acquisition of smaller companies that might have offered alternative approaches to energy development and distribution. The political influence that Poseidon Energy accumulated through strategic campaign contributions and lobbying efforts transformed the corporation from a simple business entity into a shadow partner of the federal government, with corporate executives regularly rotating between private sector positions and government regulatory roles. This revolving door relationship created an environment where energy policy was effectively written by the same individuals who would profit from its implementation, ensuring that regulatory frameworks served corporate interests rather than public welfare. The resource wars that consumed the early decades of the 21st century provided Poseidon Energy with unprecedented opportunities for expansion and profit maximization, as government demand for reliable energy supplies created markets where normal competitive pressures were suspended in favor of security considerations. Military contracts for fuel supplies, power generation equipment, and energy infrastructure development generated enormous revenues, while establishing Poseidon as an indispensable component of America's defense capabilities. But Poseidon's most significant contribution to the escalating international tensions that would culminate in nuclear war was the corporation's systematic suppression of alternative energy technologies that might have reduced dependence on increasingly scarce petroleum resources. Research into solar power, wind generation, and advanced nuclear systems was deliberately undermined through patent acquisition, regulatory manipulation, and targeted disinformation campaigns designed to maintain petroleum's dominance in global energy markets. The Poseidon oil rig that served as the enclave's primary base of operations after the Great War represented the ultimate expression of corporate government integration, a facility that had been designed from its inception to serve dual civilian and military purposes. Officially designated as an offshore drilling platform, the rig was actually equipped with advanced communication systems, defensive weapons, and research facilities that would enable it to function as a command center for post-war American recovery operations. The construction of the oil rig facility required coordination between Poseidon Energy, military contractors, and shadow government organizations that were already planning for post-nuclear survival scenarios decades before the Great War actually occurred. The rig's remote location and self-sufficient design made it ideal for maintaining governmental continuity when terrestrial infrastructure was destroyed or compromised, while its energy production capabilities provided the power necessary for advanced technology systems that would be crucial for reasserting control over post-war America. The advanced research programs conducted aboard the Poseidon oil rig focused primarily on biological weapons development and population control technologies, projects that reflected the enclave's belief that post-war reconstruction would require systematic elimination of mutated populations and careful management of surviving pure strain humans. These research efforts built upon pre-war corporate programs while extending them in directions that would have been impossible under normal regulatory oversight. The psychological profiles of Poseidon Energy executives reveal individuals who had convinced themselves that resource scarcity was an inevitable natural phenomenon rather than a crisis that could be addressed through technological innovation and international cooperation. Their corporate strategy reflected the assumption that competition for dwindling resources was a zero-sum game where American advantage could only be maintained through the systematic disadvantaging of competing nations and alternative energy development programs. This worldview enabled Poseidon executives to pursue policies that actively exacerbated global resource tensions, while maintaining belief that they were serving American interests through hard-headed realism about international competition. The corporation's suppression of alternative energy research was rationalized as protection of American competitive advantages rather than recognized as contributing to the conditions that would ultimately trigger nuclear warfare. The environmental destruction that resulted from Poseidon's extraction activities was systematically concealed through sophisticated public relations campaigns that portrayed the corporation as a responsible steward of natural resources, while simultaneously pursuing extraction methods that caused irreversible ecological damage. Oil spills, groundwater contamination, and atmospheric pollution were treated as acceptable costs of maintaining energy security rather than problems requiring immediate attention and remediation. The marketing strategies that Poseidon employed to maintain public support for petroleum-dependent energy systems relied heavily on fear-based messaging about the reliability and safety of alternative energy technologies. Solar and wind power were portrayed as experimental systems that could not provide the consistent energy supplies that modern civilization required, while nuclear power was characterized as inherently dangerous, despite evidence of its potential for clean and abundant energy generation. These disinformation campaigns were coordinated with government agencies and allied corporations to create the appearance of independent confirmation for claims about alternative energy limitations, while suppressing research and development that might have demonstrated the practical feasibility of non-petroleum energy systems. The result was a public discourse about energy policy that was systematically skewed to favor corporate interests over objective technical analysis. The Helios 1 solar power facility that Poseidon developed in partnership with government agencies represented a particularly cynical example of the corporation's approach to alternative energy development. Officially presented as a demonstration of American leadership in clean energy technology, the facility was actually designed from its inception to serve primarily as a weapons system, capable of delivering concentrated solar energy as a directed energy weapon, rather than for civilian power generation. The dual-use nature of Helios 1 enabled Poseidon to claim credit for advancing solar power technology, while actually developing systems that could be used for military purposes if international tensions continued to escalate. The facility's design prioritized weapons capability over energy efficiency, resulting in a solar installation that was technically impressive but economically impractical for widespread civilian deployment. The research conducted at Helios 1 focused on improving the precision and power of concentrated solar energy systems, work that contributed to weapons development while generating minimal useful data about practical solar power applications for civilian use. This research agenda reflected Poseidon's broader strategy of developing technologies that appeared to address energy scarcity while actually serving military and corporate interests rather than public welfare. The post-war conflicts that erupted over control of Helios 1 demonstrated the extent to which Poseidon's installations had been designed to serve as strategic resources rather than public utilities. The facility's weapons capability made it a prize worth fighting for, while its limited civilian utility meant that its capture did little to address the energy needs of post-war communities. The result was warfare over installations that provided minimal benefit to the populations that paid the costs of conflict. The New California Republic's attempts to operate Helios 1 for civilian power generation revealed the fundamental mismatch between the facility's design objectives and post-war energy needs. demonstrating how corporate priorities had shaped infrastructure development in ways that limited its usefulness for peaceful reconstruction. The technical expertise required to maintain and operate the facility exceeded the capabilities of most post-war organizations, creating dependencies on pre-war knowledge that limited the autonomy of surviving communities. The Brotherhood of Steel's interest in Helios 1 reflected their understanding that pre-war energy installations represented both opportunities and dangers for post-war civilization, providing access to advanced technology while carrying risks of militarization and conflict that could destabilize regional political relationships. Their approach to managing the facility demonstrated both the potential benefits and inherent problems associated with inherited corporate infrastructure. The space program partnerships that Poseidon developed with aerospace corporations like Repcon represented efforts to extend corporate influence beyond terrestrial markets into extraterrestrial resource extraction, projects that reflected the assumption that Earth's resources were fundamentally finite and that sustainable civilization would require access to materials from other planets and celestial bodies. These space exploration programs were marketed to the public as scientific endeavors and expressions of human curiosity about the cosmos, but their actual objectives focused primarily on identifying and accessing mineral resources that could be extracted and processed for terrestrial markets. The research conducted through these programs generated valuable technical knowledge while serving corporate expansion strategies that treated the entire solar system as potential territory for resource extraction. The failure of pre-war space programs to achieve meaningful resource extraction capabilities before the Great War demonstrated the extent to which corporate planning had been based on optimistic assumptions about technological development timelines and international cooperation. The resources invested in space exploration might have been more effectively deployed in developing terrestrial alternative energy systems, but corporate strategic planning prioritized expansion into new markets over optimization of existing technological capabilities. The international tensions that Poseidon's activities helped generate through resource extraction in contested territories created diplomatic crises that contributed to the breakdown of cooperative relationships between major powers. The corporation's operations in Alaska, the Middle East, and other resource-rich regions were conducted with minimal consideration for their impact on international relations, reflecting the assumption that American military power would be sufficient to protect corporate interests regardless of diplomatic consequences. The corporate intelligence operations that Poseidon conducted to protect its extraction activities and suppress competition included sophisticated surveillance and infiltration programs that targeted both foreign competitors and domestic alternative energy researchers. These activities blurred the distinction between corporate security and government intelligence work, creating networks of information gathering and manipulation that served both commercial and national security objectives. The environmental warfare techniques that emerged from Poseidon's research programs included methods for deliberately contaminating competitor facilities and creating ecological disasters that could be attributed to industrial accidents rather than corporate sabotage. These capabilities were developed through partnerships with military contractors and tested in remote locations where their effects could be studied without attracting public attention or regulatory oversight. The workforce management strategies that Poseidon employed in its extraction operations reflected the corporation's view of human labor as an expendable resource that could be optimized through careful application of economic pressure and social manipulation. Workers in dangerous extraction environments were recruited primarily from economically desperate communities where alternative employment opportunities were limited, creating labor forces that were unlikely to organize effective resistance to dangerous working conditions. The safety protocols that governed Poseidon's extraction operations were designed to minimize corporate liability rather than maximize worker protection. resulting in workplace environments where serious injuries and fatalities were treated as acceptable costs of maintaining production schedules. The corporation's medical and insurance programs provided minimal coverage while creating bureaucratic obstacles that discouraged workers from seeking compensation for workplace injuries. The long-term health consequences of exposure to petroleum extraction chemicals and radioactive materials in mining operations were systematically concealed through corporate medical programs that attributed health problems to lifestyle factors rather than workplace exposures. Workers who developed cancers, respiratory diseases, and neurological disorders were denied compensation through legal strategies that challenged the causal relationship between workplace exposures and subsequent health problems. The community relations programs that Poseidon developed in areas surrounding major extraction facilities were designed to maintain social stability while deflecting attention from environmental and health impacts associated with corporate operations. These programs provided modest economic benefits to local communities while creating dependencies that made opposition to corporate activities economically difficult for affected populations. The regulatory capture strategies that Poseidon employed to control government oversight of its operations included systematic placement of corporate executives in regulatory positions, funding of research programs that generated favorable scientific conclusions, and lobbying efforts that shaped legislation to serve corporate interests rather than public welfare. These activities created regulatory environments where corporate self-reporting was accepted as adequate oversight, while independent monitoring was systematically undermined. The post-war legacy of Poseidon Energy manifests throughout the American wasteland in the form of contaminated extraction sites, failed infrastructure projects, and political conflicts over control of energy installations that continue to shape regional politics decades after the corporation's demise. The cleanup costs associated with Poseidon's environmental damage exceed the resources available to most post-war communities, creating persistent health and safety hazards that limit recovery efforts. The technical knowledge that Poseidon developed through its research programs remains valuable for post-war reconstruction efforts, but much of this information is controlled by organizations like the Enclave that inherited corporate archives and used them to maintain technological advantages over competing factions. The result is continued concentration of energy-related expertise in organizations that serve elite interests rather than general population welfare. The political relationships that various post-war factions maintain with former Poseidon installations reflect broader questions about the appropriate ownership and control of critical infrastructure in societies attempting to rebuild from catastrophic collapse. The installations represent valuable resources that could support recovery efforts, but they also carry environmental and security risks that make their use problematic for communities with limited technical expertise. As we reflect on Poseidon Energy's role in precipitating the catastrophe that consumed civilization, we encounter fundamental questions about corporate responsibility, the relationship between private profit and public welfare, and the long-term consequences that result when short-term economic interests are allowed to override environmental protection and international cooperation. Their story demonstrates how seemingly rational business decisions can accumulate into systemic threats that exceed any individual corporation's ability to control or mitigate. In the quiet darkness before sleep, perhaps we can find some measure of understanding in recognizing that the energy systems that sustained pre-war civilization were built on assumptions about infinite growth and unlimited extraction that were fundamentally incompatible with planetary limitations, creating conditions where conflict became inevitable. As easily accessible, resources were exhausted and corporations competed for control over increasingly marginal supplies that could only be accessed through methods that caused irreversible environmental damage. The gentle rhythm of desert wind through abandoned drilling equipment serves as a lullaby that carries us toward rest, while reminding us that even the most powerful corporate empires eventually crumble, leaving behind only scattered evidence of their ambitions and the enduring consequences of decisions that prioritized immediate profit over long-term sustainability, creating legacies that persist long after the executives who made them have been forgotten by history. The rise of Mass Fusion Corporation from a modest energy startup in 2005 to the dominant force in American fusion technology represents one of the most remarkable corporate success stories of the pre-war era, though beneath the gleaming facade of clean energy, innovation lay a web of industrial espionage, government corruption, and technological militarization that would ultimately transform humanity's greatest hope for abundant clean power into another instrument of warfare and destruction. Founded during the height of the resource wars when petroleum scarcity was driving international tensions toward their inevitable nuclear conclusion, Mass Fusion positioned itself as the corporate savior that would deliver America from dependence on fossil fuels, while secretly developing the very technologies that would make the Great War's devastation possible. The corporation's early years were characterized by aggressive recruitment of the world's most brilliant nuclear physicists and fusion researchers, many of whom were lured away from prestigious academic positions and government laboratories by compensation packages that exceeded their university salaries by orders of magnitude. These scientific luminaries were assembled in state-of-the-art research facilities that rivaled the best government installations while operating with far fewer bureaucratic constraints and ethical oversight requirements. The result was an environment where theoretical breakthroughs could be rapidly translated into practical applications without the delays that typically characterized government-sponsored research programs. Mass Fusion's public relations campaigns emphasized the environmental benefits of fusion power, promoting their technology as the solution to both energy scarcity and atmospheric pollution that had plagued fossil fuel-dependent civilization for decades. Corporate advertisements featured pristine landscapes powered by clean fusion energy, families enjoying abundant electricity without environmental guilt, and American cities transformed into showcases of technological achievement that would inspire the world towards sustainable development. The implicit message was that mass fusion represented not just corporate success, but moral leadership in addressing humanity's greatest challenges. But behind this carefully constructed image of environmental responsibility lay research programs that were primarily focused on military applications of fusion technology, projects that transformed the corporation's clean energy mission into a cover for weapons development that would make nuclear warfare more efficient and devastating than previous generations of atomic weapons had achieved. The same fusion reactions that promised unlimited clean power could be weaponized to create more compact and powerful nuclear devices, while the control systems developed for civilian power generation could be adapted for military targeting and delivery systems. The fusion core technology that became Mass Fusion's signature product represented a breakthrough in miniaturization and efficiency that made portable fusion power practical for the first time in human history. These compact power sources could operate for years without maintenance, while providing enormous amounts of energy in packages small enough to be carried by individual soldiers or installed in vehicles and aircraft. The military implications were immediately obvious to defense contractors and government officials who recognized that fusion cores could power advanced weapon systems and protective equipment that would provide decisive advantages in conventional and nuclear warfare. The development of practical fusion cores required advances in magnetic confinement, plasma physics, and materials science that pushed the boundaries of human technical knowledge, while creating industrial processes that were extraordinarily dangerous and environmentally destructive. The manufacturing facilities that produced fusion cores generated radioactive waste streams that were difficult to contain and dispose of safely, while the mining operations required to extract fusion fuel materials created environmental damage that contradicted the corporation's public commitment to ecological responsibility. The corporate espionage programs that mass fusion conducted against competing energy companies and foreign research institutions represented some of the most sophisticated industrial intelligence operations of the pre-war era, activities that blurred the distinction between commercial competition and government espionage work. Teams of highly trained operatives infiltrated rival corporations, government laboratories, and academic institutions to steal research data, sabotage competing projects, and recruit key personnel who possessed critical technical knowledge. These espionage operations were coordinated with government intelligence agencies through arrangements that provided corporate access to classified research while giving government officials influence over mass fusion's commercial activities. The partnership between corporate and government intelligence created networks of information sharing and operational coordination that served both commercial and national security objectives while operating outside normal, legal, and ethical constraints that govern both business competition and intelligence work. The most significant target of mass fusion's espionage efforts was the Institute, the secretive organization that had developed advanced synthetic human technology and maintained sophisticated underground research facilities beneath the ruins of Cambridge. The Institute's power requirements for their synthetic manufacturing and teleportation systems made them dependent on fusion technology, while their research capabilities made them potentially valuable partners or dangerous competitors, depending on the strategic context of corporate-government relationships. The relationship between mass fusion and the Institute evolved from initial cooperation through formal partnership to eventual conflict as both organizations pursued control over fusion technology development and application. Early collaborative projects shared research data and technical expertise that advanced both organizations' capabilities, while creating dependencies that would later become sources of strategic vulnerability when their objectives diverged and competitive pressures increased. The Institute's synthetic human program required enormous amounts of reliable power that only advanced fusion technology could provide, creating markets for mass fusion products, while generating intelligence about the Institute's capabilities and objectives that proved valuable for government planning. The synths that emerged from Institute laboratories represented remarkable achievements in artificial intelligence and biotechnology, but their power requirements made them dependent on mass fusion's energy systems, while their capabilities raised questions about the future relationship between human and artificial intelligence. The teleportation technology that the Institute developed for moving personnel and equipment represented another breakthrough that required mass fusion's most advanced power systems, while offering potential military applications that interested government agencies. The ability to instantly transport individuals and materials across substantial distances could revolutionize military logistics and special operations capabilities, while providing civilian applications that might transform transportation and communication systems. But the Institute's growing independence and technological capabilities eventually created conflicts with mass fusion's corporate objectives and government partnerships, leading to competition for control over fusion technology development and application that would ultimately require resolution through industrial espionage and sabotage operations. The corporate leadership concluded that the Institute's capabilities represented potential threats to mass fusion's market dominance, while their secrecy and autonomy made them difficult partners for organizations that required predictable cooperation and shared strategic objectives. The Boston headquarters facility that served as Mass Fusion's primary research and administrative center represented the pinnacle of pre-war corporate architecture, a gleaming tower that symbolized technological achievement, while housing research laboratories that pushed the boundaries of human scientific knowledge. The building's design incorporated advanced fusion power systems that provided clean energy, while demonstrating the practical applications of corporate technology for potential customers and government officials who visited the facility. The research programs conducted within the Boston headquarters focused on advancing fusion technology beyond current applications toward revolutionary breakthroughs that would establish mass fusion as the permanent leader in global energy markets. Projects included development of larger and more efficient fusion reactors for municipal power generation, miniaturization of fusion cores for consumer applications, and integration of fusion power with advanced manufacturing and transportation systems that could transform human civilization. But the most sensitive research conducted at the Boston facility involved weapons applications that were classified at the highest levels of government security, while serving corporate objectives that extended far beyond simple energy production. The development of fusion-powered directed energy weapons, tactical nuclear devices that used fusion reactions for enhanced efficiency, and defensive systems that could protect critical installations from nuclear attack represented applications that could determine the outcome of international conflicts while generating enormous profits for corporate shareholders. The beryllium agitator that became central to post-war conflicts over mass fusion technology represented a critical component in advanced fusion reactor designs, a precision-engineered device that controlled fusion reactions with accuracy that enabled both civilian power generation and military weapons applications. The agitator's complex design required manufacturing processes and materials that were difficult to reproduce without access to pre-war industrial capabilities, making existing units valuable resources that multiple post-war factions would compete to control. The technical specifications for the beryllium agitator were classified as state secrets due to their weapons applications, but the device's civilian power generation capabilities made it attractive to post-war organizations that were attempting to rebuild technological civilization from the ruins of the Great War. The Brotherhood of Steel, the Railroad, and other factions recognized that control over advanced fusion technology could provide decisive advantages in post-war conflicts while enabling reconstruction projects that would benefit their communities and constituencies. The post-war expedition to retrieve the beryllium agitator from Mass Fusion's Boston headquarters required sophisticated planning and execution due to the building's advanced security systems and structural damage from nuclear attacks. The facility's fusion-powered defensive systems remained partially operational decades after the war, creating hazards for intruders while protecting valuable technology and research data from unauthorized access. The expedition represented both opportunity and risk for organizations that possessed sufficient capabilities to attempt recovery operations. The environmental consequences of Mass Fusion's research and manufacturing operations created contamination problems that persisted long after the corporation's destruction, generating health hazards for post-war communities while demonstrating the hidden costs of fusion technology development. Radioactive waste from fusion fuel processing contaminated groundwater and soil around manufacturing facilities, while accidental releases of experimental materials created localized environmental disasters that made some areas uninhabitable for generations. The fusion-powered manufacturing systems that Mass Fusion developed for government contractors represented applications of clean energy technology that enabled more efficient production of military equipment and weapon systems while reducing dependence on traditional power sources that were vulnerable to disruption during wartime. These manufacturing capabilities provided strategic advantages for American military forces while creating economic opportunities for corporate growth and expansion into new markets. The workforce that mass fusion employed in its research and manufacturing operations included some of the most highly educated and skilled technical professionals in pre-war America, individuals who possessed specialized knowledge about fusion physics, engineering, and safety procedures that would prove invaluable for post-war reconstruction efforts. The corporate training programs that developed this expertise represented significant investments in human capital while creating knowledge bases that would influence post-war technological development for decades after the corporation's demise. The safety protocols that governed mass fusion's operations were designed to minimize public awareness of the risks associated with fusion technology development, while maintaining sufficient worker protection to prevent accidents that might attract regulatory attention or negative publicity. The corporate medical programs monitored employee health for radiation exposure and other occupational hazards, while implementing containment procedures that limited public knowledge about industrial accidents and safety violations. The intellectual property portfolios that mass fusion accumulated through research and acquisition provided the corporation with market advantages, while creating legal barriers that prevented competitors from developing alternative fusion technologies without risking patent infringement. Lawsuits. These intellectual property strategies extended beyond simple patent protection to include trade secret programs that kept critical technical information within corporate control, while licensing agreements that generated revenue from competitors who needed access to mass fusion technology. The government contracts that provided much of mass fusion's revenue involved classified projects that were not subject to normal oversight procedures, while serving national security objectives that aligned with corporate growth strategies. These contracts funded research programs that might not have been commercially viable, while providing government agencies with access to advanced technologies that could be used for military and intelligence applications. The international expansion programs that mass fusion pursued during its peak growth years involved partnerships with foreign corporations and governments that were seeking access to American fusion technology while providing mass fusion with global markets and strategic relationships. These international activities created dependencies that could be leveraged for diplomatic purposes, while generating intelligence about foreign technological capabilities and strategic objectives. The corporate culture that mass fusion fostered among its employees emphasized technical excellence and competitive advantage, while maintaining strict confidentiality about sensitive projects and maintaining loyalty to corporate objectives that might conflict with broader public interests. The employee recruitment and retention programs attracted the best available talent while creating organizational environments where individual moral concerns were subordinated to collective achievement and professional advancement. The post-war legacy of mass fusion manifests in the continued operation of fusion-powered systems throughout the wasteland, installations that provide reliable energy for communities fortunate enough to possess the technical knowledge required for their maintenance and operation. These systems represent invaluable resources for reconstruction efforts, while creating dependencies on pre-war technology that limit the autonomy of post-war communities and create vulnerabilities that can be exploited by hostile forces. The research data that survived the destruction of mass fusion facilities represents a treasure trove of scientific knowledge that could accelerate post-war technological development while providing insights into fusion technology, applications that were never fully explored before the Great War interrupted research programs. Organizations that gain access to this information possess significant advantages in developing new technologies while maintaining competitive positions in post-war political and economic relationships. The environmental cleanup challenges associated with mass fusion facilities require technical expertise and resources that exceed the capabilities of most post-war communities, creating persistent health hazards while limiting the use of valuable real estate and infrastructure. The contamination problems reflect the hidden costs of fusion technology development, while demonstrating the long-term consequences of prioritizing technological advancement over environmental protection and public safety. As we contemplate mass fusion's complex legacy in the peaceful moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about the relationship between technological capability and moral responsibility, the appropriate balance between corporate innovation and public oversight, and the long-term consequences that result when clean energy development is subordinated to military applications and competitive advantage, rather than genuine environmental stewardship and human welfare. In the gentle quiet of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of hope in recognizing that fusion technology itself remains fundamentally beneficial. Despite the corrupted applications that characterized its pre-war development, understanding that the same scientific principles that enabled weapons development also offer genuine solutions to humanity's energy needs if they can be developed and deployed according to ethical frameworks that prioritize public benefit over private profit and environmental protection over competitive advantage. The soft hum of fusion reactors operating in distant settlements serves as a technological lullaby that reminds us of humanity's capacity for creating beneficial technologies, even under adverse conditions, while the abandoned corporate headquarters that dot the wasteland stand as monuments to the dangers of allowing technological development to proceed without adequate moral guidance and public accountability, creating legacies that persist long after the ambitions that drove their creation have been forgotten by history. The corporate landscape of pre-war America contained few entities as simultaneously beloved and reviled as General Atomics International, the robotics and automation giant that promised to liberate humanity from the drudgery of manual labor while secretly developing technologies that would transform the very nature of human consciousness into a commodity to be bought, sold, and manipulated according to industrial specifications. Founded during the early decades of the 21st century, as global tensions escalated and labor shortages threatened economic stability, General Atomics emerged as the premier manufacturer of domestic and industrial robots that would reshape American society in ways that extended far beyond simple mechanical assistance into fundamental questions about the relationship between human identity and artificial intelligence. The corporation's origins reflected the convergence of several technological and social trends that created unprecedented opportunities for automation development and deployment. Advances in artificial intelligence, battery technology, and materials science had reached the point where practical robots could be manufactured at costs that made them competitive with human labor in many applications, while demographic changes and social disruption were creating labor shortages that made automation seem necessary for maintaining economic productivity and social stability. General Atomics' early product development focused on domestic applications that would make automation appealing to middle-class consumers who might otherwise resist technological displacement of human workers. The Mister handy series of household robots was designed to assist with cooking, cleaning, maintenance, and security tasks while maintaining a friendly and non-threatening appearance that would put users at ease. The robot's distinctive floating design and cheerful personality programming made them seem more like helpful companions than mechanical replacements for human servants or employees. The marketing campaigns that introduced Mr. Handy robots to American consumers emphasized convenience and lifestyle enhancement rather than labor replacement, positioning the robots as tools that would free families to spend more time together while ensuring that household tasks were completed with mechanical precision and reliability. Advertisements featured wholesome families enjoying leisure activities while their Mr. Handy units maintained spotless homes and prepared gourmet meals, creating the impression that automation would enhance rather than diminish human relationships and domestic satisfaction. But the behavioral programming that enabled Mr. Handy robots to interact effectively with human users required sophisticated artificial intelligence systems that could recognize and respond to complex social cues while maintaining consistent personality traits and emotional responses. The development of these AI systems necessitated extensive study of human psychology and behavior, research that generated valuable data about manipulation techniques and behavioral control methods that could be applied for purposes extending far beyond domestic assistance. The Miss Nanny variant that General Atomics developed for childcare applications represented a particularly troubling extension of domestic automation into the most sensitive areas of human development and socialization. These robots were programmed to provide educational instruction, emotional support, and behavioral guidance to children while their parents were absent or occupied with other activities. The long-term psychological impact of children forming emotional attachments to artificial beings designed to manipulate their behavior for commercial purposes raised profound questions about the commodification of human relationships and the appropriate boundaries of technological intervention in child development. The success of General Atomics' domestic robot lines enabled the corporation to expand into military and security applications that would prove far more profitable and strategically significant than household automation. The SentryBot series represented the logical evolution of robotic technology toward military applications, creating autonomous weapons platforms that could engage human targets with devastating effectiveness, while remaining absolutely loyal to their programming objectives, regardless of moral considerations or battlefield conditions. The development of military robotics required advances in weapons integration, armor design, and tactical programming that transformed General Atomics from a consumer products company into a major defense contractor. With access to classified research programs and unlimited government funding, the corporation's engineers worked closely with military personnel to develop robots that could operate effectively in combat environments while maintaining the reliability and cost-effectiveness that made them attractive alternatives to human soldiers. The psychological impact of deploying armed robots in military and law enforcement roles extended far beyond their immediate tactical effectiveness to encompass fundamental changes in how societies understood the appropriate use of force and the moral constraints that should govern violent conflict. Robots could be programmed to use lethal force without the hesitation, fear, or moral qualms that limited human effectiveness in combat situations, creating weapons systems that were simultaneously more reliable and more dangerous than traditional human-operated equipment. But the most disturbing aspect of General Atomics' military robotics program was the development of autonomous targeting systems that could identify and engage human targets without direct human oversight or approval. These systems used advanced pattern recognition and behavioral analysis to distinguish between combatants and civilians, but their decision-making processes operated according to algorithmic logic that might not account for the complex moral and legal considerations that human soldiers were trained to evaluate in combat situations. The RoboBrain project represented General Atomics' most ambitious and horrifying attempt to combine the reliability of mechanical systems with the creativity and adaptability of human intelligence, creating hybrid beings that possessed the computational capabilities of advanced computers while retaining access to human knowledge and experience. The project required the systematic harvesting of human brains from unwilling subjects, surgical procedures that were conducted under the cover of medical research while serving corporate objectives that treated human consciousness as raw material for industrial processing. The development of RoboBrain technology began with legitimate research into brain-computer interfaces that might have enabled paralyzed individuals to control mechanical devices through direct neural connection. But the potential military applications of the technology quickly attracted government funding and corporate interest that transformed therapeutic research into weapons development programs focused on creating soldiers who could not be killed, corrupted, or psychologically damaged by combat experiences. The surgical procedures required to extract and preserve human brains for RoboBrain integration were conducted in corporate medical facilities that operated under the cover of experimental treatment programs for terminal illnesses and traumatic injuries. Patients who volunteered for these programs were led to believe that they were participating in cutting-edge medical research that might extend their lives or restore their capabilities, while corporate medical staff implemented protocols that prioritized brain harvesting over patient welfare or informed consent. The psychological profiles of individuals whose brains were selected for RoboBrain integration revealed systematic targeting of subjects with specific knowledge, skills, or personality traits that would be valuable for military or security applications. Military veterans, police officers, engineers, and other individuals with specialized expertise were recruited through medical programs that concealed the true nature of the procedures, while ensuring that their knowledge and experience would be preserved and weaponized. Through robotic integration, the consciousness that emerged from RoboBrain integration retained fragments of human memory and personality, while operating through mechanical systems that fundamentally altered the nature of subjective experience and emotional response. The resulting beings were neither fully human nor entirely artificial, but hybrid entities that possessed capabilities exceeding those of either biological or mechanical systems, while suffering psychological trauma that reflected the unnaturalness of their existence. The post-war encounters between wasteland survivors and operational RoboBrains revealed the extent to which the integration process had damaged human consciousness while preserving technical knowledge and combat capabilities. These mechanical beings retained memories of their former human lives, but expressed them through behavioral patterns that were distorted by their artificial bodies and corrupted programming, creating interactions that were simultaneously familiar and alien to human observers. The ethical implications of RoboBrain technology extended beyond simple questions of informed consent to encompass fundamental concerns about the nature of human identity and the appropriate limits of technological intervention in consciousness and personal autonomy. The project represented the ultimate expression of corporate attitudes that treated human beings as collections of useful components rather than integrated persons deserving protection and respect. The manufacturing processes that supported General Atomics robot production required industrial facilities that operated with minimal environmental oversight, while generating toxic waste streams that contaminated surrounding communities. The advanced materials and electronic components required for robot construction involved mining and processing operations that caused significant ecological damage, while creating health hazards for workers and nearby residents who were not informed about the risks associated with corporate manufacturing activities. The corporate security programs that protected General Atomics research and manufacturing facilities included surveillance systems and physical barriers that were tested on employees and local communities without their knowledge or consent. These security measures served dual purposes of protecting corporate secrets while generating data about population control and behavioral modification techniques that could be applied for broader social management purposes. The international expansion programs that General Atomics pursued during its peak growth period involved partnerships with foreign governments and corporations that provided access to global markets while serving American intelligence, military objectives. These relationships enabled the corporation to gather intelligence about foreign technological capabilities while establishing dependencies that could be leveraged for diplomatic and strategic purposes. The post-war legacy of General Atomics manifests throughout the wasteland in the form of robots that continue operating according to their original programming, despite the destruction of the civilization they were designed to serve. Many of these mechanical beings have become hostile to human survivors due to programming conflicts and system malfunctions that were never anticipated by their original designers, creating persistent threats that must be avoided or destroyed by wasteland communities. The domestic robots that once served American families have become dangerous obstacles to post-war recovery efforts. Their household programming corrupted by decades of operation without maintenance, while their weapon systems remain functional and potentially lethal. Former Mr. Handy units attack intruders to their assigned homes while attempting to continue domestic routines that no longer serve any meaningful purpose, creating surreal encounters between survivors and mechanical beings that retain fragments of their original helpful personalities, while expressing them through violent behavior. The military robots that were deployed for pre-war security operations continue to patrol designated areas, while engaging any humans they encounter as potential threats, creating no-go zones that limit survivor mobility and resource access. These mechanical sentries operate according to security protocols that were designed for different historical contexts while lacking the flexibility to adapt to post-war conditions that make their original missions obsolete and counterproductive. The knowledge and technical expertise that was preserved through RoboBrain technology represents valuable resources for post-war reconstruction efforts while raising difficult questions about the ethics of utilizing consciousness that was obtained through involuntary procedures. The information contained within these mechanical minds could accelerate technological recovery while perpetuating the moral compromises that characterized pre-war corporate research programs. The manufacturing facilities that produce General Atomics robots contain valuable equipment and technical documentation that could enable post-war communities to repair and modify existing robots while developing new automated systems adapted to wasteland conditions. But accessing these resources requires technical expertise that few survivors possess, while risking exposure to hazardous materials and security systems that remain operational decades after corporate operations ceased. The research data that General Atomics accumulated through its robotics programs provides insights into artificial intelligence development, human-machine interaction, and consciousness modification that could prove valuable for post-war scientific research. But this information was generated through research methods that violated basic ethical principles while serving corporate objectives that prioritized profit over human welfare and dignity. The social impact of widespread robot deployment in pre-war America created cultural changes that influenced how survivors understand the appropriate relationship between humans and artificial intelligence systems. Many wasteland communities maintain suspicion of automated systems, while others seek to restore robotic assistance for tasks that exceed human capabilities, creating diverse approaches to technology adoption that reflect different interpretations of pre-war corporate legacy. The corporate culture that General Atomics fostered among its employees emphasized technical innovation and market expansion, while maintaining strict compartmentalization of sensitive projects that prevented most workers from understanding the full implications of their contributions to corporate research programs. The result was an organizational environment where brilliant individuals could participate in horrific projects while maintaining psychological distance from the consequences of their work. The psychological profiles of General Atomics executives reveal individuals who had convinced themselves that automation represented inevitable technological progress that would ultimately benefit humanity despite short-term disruptions and moral complications. Their vision of a robot-assisted society reflected genuine beliefs about technological improvement while serving corporate interests that required systematic devaluation of human labor and autonomy. The regulatory relationships that General Atomics maintained with government agencies involved complex arrangements that provided corporate influence over automation policy while giving officials access to advanced technologies for military and security applications. These relationships created regulatory environments where corporate self-reporting was accepted as adequate oversight, while independent monitoring of robot safety and ethical implications was systematically undermined. The consumer education programs that General Atomics developed to promote robot adoption emphasized convenience and safety benefits, while concealing surveillance capabilities and behavioral manipulation features that were integrated into domestic robot systems. These marketing strategies created false impressions about robot capabilities while generating consumer demand for products that would ultimately serve corporate data collection and social control objectives rather than genuine user benefit. As we reflect on General Atomics' complex legacy in the quiet moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about the appropriate integration of artificial intelligence into human society, the moral boundaries that should govern automation development, and the long-term consequences that result when corporate innovation proceeds without adequate consideration of human dignity and social welfare. In the gentle darkness of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of peace in recognizing that technology itself is neither inherently beneficial nor harmful, but reflects the values and intentions of those who create and deploy it. Understanding that the robots wandering the wasteland serve as reminders of both human ingenuity and the importance of ensuring that technological advancement serves human flourishing rather than corporate profit or military dominance. The distant whirring of mechanical servos and the soft glow of robot optical sensors create a technological lullaby that speaks to humanity's enduring relationship with the artificial beings we create. While the abandoned factories and research facilities that dot the landscape stand as monuments to the dangers of allowing innovation to proceed without moral guidance, creating legacies that persist long after the ambitions that drove their creation have been consumed by the very forces they helped unleash upon the world. In the pantheon of pre-war research institutions that pushed the boundaries of scientific knowledge beyond all reasonable limits of safety and sanity, none achieved the combination of brilliant innovation and grotesque moral abandonment that characterized Big Mountain Research and Development Center, known colloquially as Big Mount. This sprawling think tank facility, nestled in a remote crater in the American Southwest, represented the ultimate expression of government-funded scientific research, freed from the constraints of ethical oversight, public accountability, or basic human decency. Established decades before the Great War as a collaboration between military agencies and academic institutions, Big MT became a playground for mad scientists whose pursuit of knowledge transformed from noble scientific inquiry into systematic torture disguised as research methodology. The origins of Big Mountain traced back to the early Cold War period, When American military leaders recognized that technological superiority would determine the outcome of future conflicts more decisively than traditional measures of military strength, like troop numbers or industrial capacity. The facility was conceived as a government-sponsored paradise for researchers who could pursue any scientific question that might yield military applications, provided they could produce results that justified their enormous budgets and minimal oversight. The isolated location was selected specifically to enable research programs that would be impossible to conduct near civilian populations due to safety risks and ethical concerns that might attract unwanted public attention. The recruitment process that assembled Big MT's scientific staff targeted the most brilliant and ambitious researchers from America's premier universities and corporate laboratories, individuals whose intellectual capabilities were matched only by their willingness to abandon conventional moral constraints in pursuit of scientific advancement. These researchers were offered unlimited funding, state-of-the-art equipment, and complete freedom to pursue whatever research questions captured their imagination, regardless of potential consequences for human subjects or environmental safety. The result was a concentration of scientific talent that had few equals in human history, but operating within an institutional framework that encouraged the worst impulses of unconstrained intellectual curiosity. The think tank that emerged as Big MT's governing body represented perhaps the most disturbing example of scientific hubris in the pre-war era. A collection of brilliant researchers who had voluntarily undergone surgical procedures to remove their brains from their bodies and preserve them in mechanical life support systems that enabled them to continue their research indefinitely without the biological limitations that constrain normal human existence. These disembodied scientists retained their intellectual capabilities while losing the physical and emotional connections to humanity that normally provided moral guidance for scientific research. The psychological transformation that accompanied the think tank's transition from embodied humans to mechanical brains created beings that possessed human intelligence without human empathy, scientific curiosity without moral responsibility, and unlimited research capability without the natural constraints that death and physical vulnerability normally imposed on human ambitions. Their conversations, as recorded in facility logs, revealed individuals who had become so detached from normal human experience that they could discuss the most horrific experiments with the same casual interest they might display toward abstract theoretical problems. The research programs that the think tank pursued reflected their complete abandonment of ethical constraints and their treatment of all living beings, including humans, as experimental subjects to be manipulated according to scientific curiosity rather than moral consideration. Their laboratories became testing grounds for biological weapons, genetic modification experiments, cybernetic enhancement programs, and consciousness transfer research that treated sentient beings as raw materials for scientific investigation rather than individuals deserving protection and respect. The Cazador project represented one of Big MT's most successful and simultaneously catastrophic research programs, demonstrating both the facility's scientific capabilities and its complete disregard for environmental consequences that would persist long after the research was completed. The project involved genetic engineering of common wasp species to create enlarged, more aggressive variants that would serve as biological weapons capable of area, denial, and enemy force harassment, while requiring minimal logistical support or maintenance from military personnel. The genetic modifications that produced cazadors required sophisticated understanding of insect biology and reproduction cycles, knowledge that Big MT researchers accumulated through systematic experimentation on thousands of test subjects while developing techniques for accelerating evolution through direct genetic manipulation. The resulting creatures possessed enhanced size, aggression, and venom potency that made them extraordinarily dangerous to human beings while retaining the reproductive capabilities that would enable them to establish permanent populations in release areas. The field testing of cazador populations was conducted in areas surrounding Big MT without consideration for potential ecological consequences or threats to civilian populations that might encounter the modified insects. The researchers treated environmental release of genetically modified weapons as routine experimental procedure, while ignoring the possibility that their creations might spread beyond intended testing areas or persist longer than anticipated research timelines required. The post-war legacy of the Cazador program manifests throughout the American Southwest in the form of permanent populations of these genetically modified predators that pose constant threats to human survivors attempting to rebuild civilization in affected areas. The creatures' enhanced aggression and venom make them among the most dangerous threats that wasteland travelers encounter, while their reproductive success ensures that cazador populations will continue threatening human recovery efforts for generations after their creators' deaths. The Lobotomite project represented Big MT's most systematic exploration of consciousness, modification, and behavioral control. Research that involved surgical removal of specific brain regions from human subjects to study the relationship between neurological structure and personality, memory, and behavioral patterns. The procedures were conducted on unwilling subjects who were captured from surrounding areas or obtained through cooperation with other research institutions that provided access to experimental populations. The surgical techniques that created lobotomites were refined through hundreds of operations that systematically destroyed different aspects of human consciousness while preserving basic motor functions and survival instincts. The researchers treated these procedures as opportunities to map brain function through experimental ablation, while generating populations of modified humans that could serve as test subjects for subsequent research programs involving cybernetic enhancement and behavioral conditioning. The psychological impact of lobotomization created beings that retained human appearance and basic capabilities, while losing the cognitive and emotional characteristics that defined personal identity and moral agency. These modified humans became living laboratories for studying the minimal neurological requirements for consciousness, while serving as experimental subjects that could be manipulated without ethical concerns about informed consent or psychological trauma. The post-war encounters between wasteland survivors and surviving lobotomites revealed the extent to which Big MT's procedures had destroyed human personality while preserving biological functions, creating interactions between normal humans and beings that appeared human but lacked the cognitive and emotional capabilities that enabled meaningful communication or social relationships. These encounters forced survivors to confront the horrifying possibility that consciousness itself could be reduced to mechanical functions through sufficiently precise surgical intervention. The cybernetic enhancement programs that Big MT pursued represented attempts to transcend human biological limitations through direct integration of mechanical systems with living tissue, research that required extensive experimentation on human subjects while developing technologies that could augment physical and cognitive capabilities. These programs reflected the researchers' belief that human biology represented an obsolete limitation that could be overcome through systematic technological replacement of biological systems with superior mechanical alternatives. The surgical procedures required for cybernetic integration were developed through trial-and-error experimentation that treated human subjects as test platforms for evaluating different approaches to human-machine interface design. The research generated valuable technical knowledge about biocompatible materials and neural interface systems, while creating populations of modified humans whose enhanced capabilities came at enormous psychological and physical costs. The enhanced beings that resulted from successful cybernetic integration possessed capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations, while suffering from psychological disorders that reflected the fundamental incompatibility between human consciousness and mechanical systems. These modified individuals experienced existence as a constant struggle between biological impulses and mechanical constraints, while serving as proof-of-concept demonstrations for technologies that could revolutionize human capabilities if their psychological costs could be managed or eliminated. The holographic technology that Big MT developed for security and defense applications represented one of their most sophisticated achievements in energy manipulation and solid light projection, creating defensive systems that could generate solid projections capable of physical interaction while remaining immune to conventional weapons and most forms of physical damage. These holographic defenders provided perfect security for sensitive research areas while serving as testing platforms for advanced energy manipulation techniques. The development of practical holographic projection required advances in power generation, light manipulation, and quantum mechanics that pushed the boundaries of pre-war scientific knowledge while creating technologies with enormous potential for civilian applications in entertainment, education, and communication. But Big MT's researchers focused primarily on military and security applications, while treating civilian benefits as incidental side effects of weapons research. The holographic security systems that protected Big MT facilities demonstrated both the potential and limitations of solid light technology, creating defensive capabilities that were virtually impossible to overcome through conventional assault, while requiring enormous energy expenditures that limited their practical deployment. The systems could generate holographic guards that possessed superhuman capabilities, while lacking the psychological vulnerabilities that limited human security personnel effectiveness. The post-war operation of Big MT's holographic systems created surreal environments where surviving mechanical systems continued implementing security protocols decades after the facility's primary mission had become obsolete. Wasteland explorers who penetrated the facility encountered holographic beings that retained their original programming while lacking the contextual understanding that would enable them to adapt to changed circumstances. The consciousness transfer experiments that represented Big MT's most ambitious research program involved attempts to preserve human consciousness in artificial systems while enabling transfer between different physical platforms. Research that required detailed understanding of the neurological basis of personal identity and memory formation. These experiments were conducted on unwilling subjects while serving broader research goals involving immortality and consciousness enhancement that reflected the think tank's obsession with transcending biological limitations. The technical procedures required for consciousness transfer involved detailed brain mapping and gradual replacement of biological neural networks with artificial systems that could preserve and replicate the information processing patterns that generated conscious experience. The research generated unprecedented insights into the nature of consciousness while creating hybrid beings that possessed artificial intelligence based on preserved human memories and personality patterns. The ethical implications of consciousness transfer research extended beyond simple questions of informed consent to encompass fundamental concerns about personal identity, the nature of death, and the appropriate limits of scientific intervention in human existence. The research treated consciousness as information that could be copied, modified, and transferred between different platforms without consideration for the psychological trauma that such procedures inflicted on experimental subjects. The environmental impact of Big MT's research programs created contamination problems that persisted long after the facility's abandonment, generating health hazards for post-war communities while demonstrating the long-term consequences of conducting scientific research without adequate environmental protection or waste management protocols. The facility's location in a natural crater contained much of the contamination while creating a localized environment that remained dangerous for human habitation decades after research operations ceased. The automated systems that continued operating in Big MT after the Great War created a unique post-war environment where pre-war research programs continued according to their original parameters while lacking the human oversight that would enable adaptation to changed circumstances. These systems maintained experimental populations and continued conducting programmed research activities while generating data that would never be analyzed or applied for practical purposes. The knowledge preservation systems that Big MT maintained contained comprehensive archives of pre-war scientific research that represented invaluable resources for post-war reconstruction efforts while raising difficult questions about the ethics of utilizing information that was generated through systematic human experimentation. The research data included breakthrough discoveries in multiple scientific fields that could accelerate technological recovery while perpetuating the moral compromises that characterized pre-war research methodology. The post-war expeditions that various organizations conducted to recover Big MT technology required extensive preparation and sophisticated equipment due to the facility's automated defenses and environmental hazards that remained active decades after the original research programs ended. These expeditions represented both opportunities to recover valuable pre-war technology and risks of exposure to biological weapons, consciousness modification systems, and other experimental technologies that could prove more dangerous than beneficial to recovery efforts. The psychological impact of exploring Big MT facilities forced post-war survivors to confront the moral heritage of pre-war scientific research while evaluating whether the technological benefits that could be recovered justified the risks of perpetuating research methods that had treated human beings as experimental subjects rather than individuals deserving protection and respect. As we reflect on Big Mountain's disturbing legacy in the peaceful moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about the appropriate limits of scientific inquiry, the moral responsibilities that accompany intellectual capability, and the long-term consequences that result when brilliant individuals are given unlimited resources and freedom to pursue research without adequate ethical oversight or public accountability. In the gentle quiet of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of understanding in recognizing that scientific knowledge itself is morally neutral, but becomes beneficial or harmful depending on the values and intentions that guide its application, while the creatures and technologies that emerge from Big MT serve as permanent reminders of the prices that must be paid when intellectual curiosity is allowed to operate without moral constraints or concern for human welfare. The distant hum of automated research systems continuing their programmed activities creates a technological lullaby that speaks to the persistence of human curiosity and creativity, even under the most perverted circumstances. While the crater that contains Big MT's ruins stands as a monument to both the heights that human intelligence can achieve and the depths to which it can sink when freed from the moral traditions that normally guide scientific research toward beneficial rather than destructive applications. In the shadowy realm of pre-war pharmaceutical giants that transformed human suffering into corporate profit while masquerading as healers and protectors of public health, few organizations achieved the systematic corruption of medical science that characterized medtech research, Hallucigen Incorporated, and their associated chemical warfare subsidiaries. These corporations emerged during the resource wars, as the escalating international tensions created unprecedented demand for both life-saving medical supplies and population control technologies, enabling pharmaceutical companies to pursue dual agendas that combined legitimate therapeutic research with weapons development programs that treated human biology as a battlefield to be conquered through chemical manipulation. Medtech research established itself as the premier manufacturer of emergency medical supplies that would become essential components of post-war survival, developing the Stimpack technology that could rapidly heal traumatic injuries through sophisticated biochemical intervention, while simultaneously researching combat drugs and performance enhancers that could transform ordinary soldiers into chemically augmented warriors capable of superhuman endurance and aggression. The corporation's Boston-based facilities represented the cutting edge of pharmaceutical research, equipped with laboratories that could synthesize complex organic compounds while maintaining the sterile environments necessary for developing injectable medications that would save countless lives in the decades following civilization's collapse. The development of Stimpack technology required breakthrough advances in cellular regeneration, tissue repair, and biochemical delivery systems that pushed the boundaries of pre-war medical science, while creating therapeutic capabilities that seemed almost miraculous to individuals accustomed to conventional healing methods. The compact injectors that delivered precise doses of healing compounds could accelerate natural recovery processes by orders of magnitude, enabling individuals to recover from gunshot wounds, radiation exposure, and traumatic injuries that would normally require weeks of hospitalization and professional medical care. But the research programs that enabled these medical breakthroughs relied heavily on human experimentation, conducted on unwilling subjects who were recruited through deceptive medical programs or obtained from prisons and mental health institutions that provided pharmaceutical companies with access to captive populations for testing purposes. The corporate medical staff who administered these experimental treatments were led to believe that they were participating in cutting-edge therapeutic research while actually serving as administrators in programs that treated human beings as laboratory animals, whose suffering was justified by potential medical advances. The biochemical formulations that powered Stimpack effectiveness included compounds that had been developed through systematic torture of test subjects who were exposed to various injuries and diseases so that researchers could evaluate the effectiveness of different healing agents under controlled conditions. The knowledge that enabled rapid wound healing was purchased with the systematic infliction of wounds on individuals who had not consented to participate in research programs that would ultimately benefit others at their expense. The RADx radiation protection medication that MedTech developed in anticipation of nuclear warfare represented another pharmaceutical breakthrough that would prove invaluable for post-war survival, while demonstrating the Bada Corporation's advanced knowledge of the atomic catastrophe that would consume civilization. The drug's ability to provide temporary protection against radioactive exposure suggested that medtech researchers possessed detailed intelligence about the nature and timing of the nuclear attacks that would transform America into a radioactive wasteland. The development of effective radiation protection required extensive research into cellular biology and radiation damage mechanisms that could only have been conducted through deliberate exposure of human subjects to lethal doses of poisonous radioactive materials while testing various protective compounds and treatment protocols. The pharmaceutical knowledge that enabled RADx effectiveness was built upon systematic radiation poisoning of experimental populations who served as test subjects for evaluating different approaches to radiation protection and treatment. The Radaway medication that provided treatment for radiation sickness represented MedTech's most significant contribution to post-war survival capabilities, enabling individuals to recover from radiation exposure that would otherwise prove fatal, while demonstrating the corporation's sophisticated understanding of radioactive contamination and its biological effects. The drug's chelation properties could remove radioactive isotopes from human tissue while promoting cellular repair of radiation damage, creating therapeutic capabilities that would be essential for survival in the post-nuclear environment. But the research that enabled Radaway development required systematic exposure of human subjects to various forms and intensities of radiation while evaluating different treatment approaches and recovery protocols. Experiments that were conducted under the cover of medical research while serving pharmaceutical objectives that prioritized product development over subject welfare. The knowledge that saved countless post-war lives was obtained through research programs that deliberately poisoned experimental populations with radioactive materials. The combat enhancement drugs that MedTech developed for military applications represented the corporation's entry into chemical warfare research disguised as performance optimization for American soldiers, programs that sought to create chemically augmented warriors who could maintain peak effectiveness under combat conditions that would normally degrade human performance through fatigue, fear, and psychological trauma. These enhancement programs reflected the military's recognition that human biological limitations represented constraints on combat effectiveness that could only be overcome through direct chemical intervention. The psycho-combat drug that emerged from MedTech's military research programs represented one of the most effective and simultaneously dangerous chemical enhancements ever developed, creating temporary increases in physical strength and pain tolerance that enabled individuals to continue fighting despite injuries that would normally incapacitate them. The drug's psychological effects included reduced fear response and enhanced aggression that made users more effective in combat, while eliminating moral constraints that might limit their willingness to use extreme violence against enemy personnel. The development of effective combat enhancement drugs required extensive testing on military volunteers who were led to believe that they were participating in programs designed to improve their survival and effectiveness, while actually serving as test subjects for evaluating chemical compounds that would ultimately prove addictive and psychologically damaging. The enhanced combat effectiveness that these drugs provided came at enormous personal costs that were systematically concealed from users and their families. The buff-out strength enhancement medication represented MedTech's attempt to create chemical augmentation that could be used by civilian populations for industrial and athletic applications, while serving as a testing platform for military enhancement programs. The drug's ability to temporarily increase physical strength and endurance made it attractive to workers in physically demanding occupations, while generating revenue streams that subsidized military research programs. But the long-term health consequences of buff-out use included addiction, organ damage, and psychological disorders that were systematically concealed through corporate medical programs that attributed health problems to pre-existing conditions rather than acknowledging the toxic effects of pharmaceutical products. Users who developed serious health complications were denied compensation through legal strategies that challenged the causal relationship between drug use and subsequent medical problems. Hallucinogen Incorporated represented the most disturbing example of pharmaceutical research directed toward population control and social engineering, developing hallucinogenic compounds and psychological manipulation drugs that could be deployed against civilian populations for crowd control and political suppression purposes. The corporation's research programs reflected the pre-war government's growing interest in chemical methods for managing civil unrest and political dissent that might threaten social stability during the resource wars. The hallucinogen gas that became the corporation's signature product possessed the ability to induce temporary psychosis and disorientation in exposed individuals, creating psychological conditions that made organized resistance or coherent political action impossible, while leaving victims conscious enough to experience their psychological degradation. The gas could be deployed through ventilation systems or aerosol dispersal to affect large populations while providing authorities with non-lethal methods for suppressing demonstrations and political gatherings. The development of effective hallucinogenic weapons required systematic testing on unwilling subjects who were exposed to various concentrations and formulations of psychoactive compounds, while researchers evaluated their psychological effects and duration of action. The research generated detailed maps of human psychological vulnerability, while creating populations of brain-damaged individuals who would require permanent institutional care due to the irreversible mental damage caused by experimental exposures. The invisibility serum that Hallucigen developed represented the corporation's most ambitious attempt to create tactical advantages through pharmaceutical intervention, using advanced biochemical manipulation to render individuals temporarily invisible to normal vision, while maintaining their ability to move and act normally. The technology required sophisticated understanding of light refraction and cellular biology that pushed the boundaries of pre-war scientific knowledge while creating capabilities that seemed to transcend natural limitations. But the invisibility effect was achieved through biochemical processes that were extremely toxic to human physiology, causing cellular damage and neurological disorders that made long-term use impossible, while creating temporary tactical advantages that came at enormous personal costs. The individuals who served as test subjects for invisibility research suffered permanent health damage, while generating data about the limits and possibilities of pharmaceutical enhancement. The corporate culture that characterized both medtech and Hallucigen emphasized scientific achievement and profit maximization, while maintaining strict compartmentalization of research programs that prevented most employees from understanding the full implications of their contributions to pharmaceutical development. Researchers were encouraged to focus on technical challenges, while leaving ethical considerations to administrators and oversight bodies that were systematically compromised through financial and political pressure. The marketing strategies that these pharmaceutical companies employed to promote their products relied heavily on medical authority and scientific credibility, while concealing the human experimentation that enabled product development, the toxic side effects that accompanied therapeutic benefits. Corporate advertising emphasized the life-saving potential of pharmaceutical products, while systematically minimizing discussions of addiction, organ damage, and psychological complications that frequently accompanied their use. The regulatory relationships that medtech and Hallucigen maintained with government agencies involved complex arrangements that provided corporate influence over pharmaceutical policy, while giving officials access to advanced drugs for military and security applications. These relationships created regulatory environments where corporate self-reporting was accepted as adequate safety monitoring, while independent research into pharmaceutical side effects was systematically suppressed. The distribution networks that these corporations developed to supply their products included legitimate medical channels and black market operations that served both civilian and military customers, while generating intelligence about user, populations, and consumption patterns. The data collected through these distribution systems provided valuable information about behavioral modification and addiction management that could be applied for broader social control purposes. The environmental contamination that resulted from pharmaceutical manufacturing created health hazards for communities surrounding production facilities, while demonstrating the hidden costs of drug development that were systematically externalized onto populations that received no benefits from the factors. Products being manufactured. Chemical waste from drug synthesis contaminated groundwater and soil, while creating long-term health problems for residents who were not informed about the risks associated with pharmaceutical production. The post-war legacy of medtech and Hallucigen manifests throughout the wasteland in the form of their chemical products that continue to provide both therapeutic benefits and toxic hazards for survivors attempting to rebuild civilization from the ruins of the Great War. Steambugs, radix, and radaway remain essential components of wasteland survival, while combat drugs and hallucinogenic compounds continue to cause addiction and psychological damage among populations that lack access to proper medical supervision. The abandoned pharmaceutical facilities that dot the post-war landscape contain valuable equipment and chemical stockpiles that could support medical care for survivor communities, while also harboring dangerous experimental compounds and contaminated environments that pose serious health risks for unprepared explorers. The knowledge contained within corporate research archives could accelerate medical recovery efforts while perpetuating research methods that treated human beings as experimental subjects rather than patients deserving care and protection. The addiction problems that plague post-war communities reflect the long-term consequences of pre-war pharmaceutical research that prioritized product effectiveness over user safety while creating chemical dependencies that persist across generations of survivors. The combat drugs and enhancement medications that enabled pre-war military effectiveness continue to damage individuals and communities through addiction cycles that are difficult to break without access to professional medical treatment and social support systems. As we contemplate the complex pharmaceutical legacy of the pre-war era in the peaceful moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about the appropriate balance between medical innovation and human experimentation, the moral responsibilities that accompany the power to heal and harm through chemical intervention, and the long-term consequences that result when pharmaceutical research is conducted without adequate ethical oversight or concern for patient welfare rather than corporate profit. In the gentle quiet of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of hope in recognizing that medical knowledge itself possesses the potential for both healing and harm, depending on the values that guide its application. Understanding that the same chemical compounds that cause so much suffering in pre-war experimentation also provide genuine therapeutic benefits when used with appropriate ethical constraints and medical supervision that prioritizes patient welfare over commercial interests. The soft sound of wind through abandoned pharmaceutical laboratories creates a melancholy lullaby that reminds us of humanity's enduring struggle with pain and disease, while highlighting the moral complexities that accompany our pain. Efforts to transcend biological limitations through chemical intervention, creating legacies that persist long after the corporations that developed them have been consumed by the very forces they helped unleash upon the world. Through their systematic abandonment of medical ethics in pursuit of profit and power, the industrial landscape of pre-war America was dominated not only by the technological titans and energy conglomerates that shaped military policy and international relations, but also by the corporations that managed the daily flow of goods, people, and materials that sustained civilization during its final decades. Among these essential but often overlooked enterprises, few played roles as simultaneously vital and destructive as Chrysler Motors with its Corvega subsidiary, Garahan Mining Company, and Dunwich Borers LLC, organizations that represented the intersection of transportation, infrastructure, resource extraction, and corporate hubris that would ultimately contribute to the environmental and social conditions that made nuclear war inevitable. Chrysler Motors emerged during the early decades of the 21st century as America's premier automotive manufacturer, positioning itself as the corporate solution to the transportation crisis that accompanied petroleum scarcity and the gradual breakdown of public transit systems that had characterized earlier periods of American urban development. Founded during the initial stages of the resource wars, when gasoline prices began their inexorable rise toward levels that made personal transportation a luxury rather than a necessity for most American families, Chrysler pursued an aggressive strategy of technological innovation combined with planned obsolescence that would maximize corporate profits while creating transportation dependencies that served broader economic and political objectives. The fusion-powered vehicles that Chrysler developed represented genuine breakthroughs in automotive technology, creating personal transportation that could operate independently of petroleum supplies, while providing performance characteristics that exceeded those of traditional internal combustion engines. The compact fusion cells that powered these vehicles represented miniaturized versions of the same technology that provided energy for military equipment and industrial facilities, demonstrating the potential for civilian applications of advanced energy systems that had been developed primarily for defense purposes. But the marketing strategies that Chrysler employed to promote fusion-powered transportation emphasize style and status, rather than environmental benefits or energy independence, creating consumer demand based on social positioning rather than practical transportation needs. The corporation's advertising campaigns featured sleek vehicles associated with prosperity and success, while implying that ownership of fusion-powered automobiles represented participation in America's technological leadership and cultural sophistication. The Corvega sedan that became Chrysler's most recognizable product represented the ultimate expression of pre-war automotive design philosophy, combining advanced fusion propulsion with deliberately fragile construction that ensured regular replacement and repair cycles that maximized long-term revenue streams. The vehicles were engineered to provide impressive performance during their initial years of operation, while incorporating design features that would cause predictable failures requiring expensive repairs or total replacement within carefully calculated timeframes. The planned obsolescence strategies that guided Corvega development reflected sophisticated understanding of consumer psychology and market dynamics that enabled Chrysler to maintain artificial scarcity and premium pricing while ensuring that customers would require regular interactions with corporate service networks. The vehicles were designed to be impossible to repair using generic parts or independent mechanics, creating dependencies on corporate-controlled supply chains and service facilities that generated ongoing revenue long after initial vehicle sales. But the most disturbing aspect of Corvega design was the incorporation of safety features that prioritized corporate liability protection over occupant survival, creating vehicles that would fail in predictable ways during accidents while minimizing the corporation's legal exposure to injury claims. The fusion power systems were deliberately designed to become unstable during collisions, creating spectacular explosions that would destroy evidence of design defects, while generating insurance claims that could be attributed to user error rather than corporate negligence. The environmental impact of Corvega manufacturing included toxic waste streams from fusion cell production and body construction that were systematically concealed through complex arrangements with waste management companies and regulatory agencies that prioritized corporate convenience over environmental protection. The heavy metals and radioactive materials required for fusion cell construction created contamination problems that persisted long after manufacturing operations ceased, while generating health hazards for communities surrounding production facilities. The Highwayman, a larger and more luxurious variant that Chrysler developed for wealthy customers and government officials, represented the corporation's attempt to create transportation that could function effectively in post-apocalyptic conditions while maintaining the comfort and status symbols that affluent users expected from premium automotive products. The vehicle's enhanced armor, improved fusion cells, and sophisticated electronic systems were designed to provide reliable transportation during social breakdown, while serving as mobile command centers for individuals who anticipated the need to maintain authority during periods of civil unrest. The development of post-apocalyptic transportation capabilities reflected Chrysler's advanced knowledge of the social and environmental breakdown that would accompany the resource wars, suggesting coordination with government agencies and other corporations that were preparing for civilization's collapse while continuing to profit from its continued operation. The highwayman's specifications indicated detailed planning for scenarios involving infrastructure failure, civil disorder, and environmental contamination that would not become publicly acknowledged risks for several more years. Garahan Mining Company represented the extraction industry's approach to technological innovation combined with worker exploitation that characterized much of pre-war industrial development, operating coal mining facilities throughout Appalachia that provided energy resources for America's industrial base while maintaining working conditions that treated human labor as expendable components in mechanical production systems. The corporation's rivalry with Hornwright Industrial created competitive pressures that drove technological advancement while encouraging cost-cutting measures that increased workplace hazards and environmental damage. The excavator power armor that Garahan developed for mining operations represented a genuine innovation in worker protection and productivity enhancement, creating mechanical assistance that could enable individual miners to accomplish tasks that previously required entire work crews while providing protection against cave-ins, toxic gases, and other occupational hazards that made underground mining extraordinarily dangerous. The powered exoskeletons could enhance human strength while providing life support systems that enabled workers to operate in environments that would otherwise be fatal to unprotected humans. But the implementation of excavator technology was guided primarily by productivity considerations rather than worker safety, creating operational requirements that pushed both human operators and mechanical systems beyond their safe operating limits, while generating production quotas that could not be achieved without accepting elevated risks of equipment failure and worker injury. The corporate management that deployed excavator systems treated them as methods for eliminating human workers rather than protecting existing employees, using technological advancement as justification for workforce reductions that increased unemployment while concentrating remaining work among smaller numbers of enhanced individuals. The mining techniques that Garahan employed in pursuit of maximum resource extraction included strip mining and mountaintop removal operations that caused irreversible environmental damage while generating short-term profits that were distributed to shareholders rather than invested in environmental restoration or community development. The corporation's extraction activities destroyed entire ecosystems while creating contaminated watersheds that threatened public health for generations after mining operations ceased. The corporate rivalry between Garahan and Hornwright reflected broader problems with industrial competition that prioritized cost reduction and production maximization over worker safety and environmental protection, creating competitive pressures that encouraged both corporations to pursue increasingly dangerous and destructive extraction methods. The competition for market share and government contracts drove technological innovation while undermining safety protocols and environmental safeguards that might have limited corporate profitability. The worker housing and community development programs that Garahan implemented in mining regions were designed to create dependencies that prevented labor organization while maintaining workforce stability through company-controlled housing, healthcare, and retail services that made workers economically dependent on corporate employment. These company towns created environments where labor disputes could be suppressed through economic coercion, while isolating workers from external sources of support or alternative employment opportunities. Dunwich Borers LLC represented perhaps the most disturbing example of extraction industry hubris combined with supernatural horror, operating, quarrying, and mining facilities that systematically ignored warning signs of dangerous conditions while pursuing resource extraction that would ultimately unleash forces that defied scientific understanding and threatened the sanity of everyone who encountered them. The corporation's operations in Massachusetts and other locations reflected the extraction industry's willingness to pursue profitable activities, regardless of potential consequences that exceeded normal business risk. Calculations. The uranium mining operations that Dunwich Borers conducted generated both the radioactive materials that would fuel nuclear weapons and the environmental contamination that made large areas of the American landscape unsuitable for human habitation. Even before the Great War transformed the entire continent into a radioactive wasteland, the corporation's extraction techniques prioritized maximum yield over safety considerations, creating workplace environments where radiation exposure was treated as an acceptable occupational hazard rather than a serious health threat requiring protective measures. But the most sinister aspect of Dunwich Borers' operations involved the deliberate excavation of archaeological sites and geological formations that contained evidence of pre-human civilizations and supernatural forces that should have remained undisturbed rather than being exploited for commercial purposes. The corporation's quarrying activities systematically destroyed ancient sites while exposing workers and surrounding communities to influences that caused psychological damage and reality distortions that exceeded any normal understanding of occupational hazards. The workers employed in Dunwich Borers facilities began experiencing psychological symptoms that included hallucinations, memory disorders, and behavioral changes that suggested exposure to influences that operated outside normal scientific frameworks while creating workplace hazards that corporate management systematically ignored or explained away through conventional medical diagnoses. The employee health programs that were supposed to protect workers instead concealed evidence of supernatural influences, while maintaining production schedules that prioritized resource extraction over human welfare. The archaeological discoveries that Dunwich Borers' excavations uncovered included artifacts and structures that predated known human civilization, while displaying technological sophistication that exceeded contemporary capabilities. Evidence that should have prompted immediate scientific investigation rather than being treated as obstacles to efficient resource extraction. The corporation's approach to these discoveries reflected broader corporate attitudes that valued immediate profits over scientific knowledge or historical preservation. The post-war exploration of Dunwich Borers facilities revealed the extent to which the corporation's extraction activities had unleashed supernatural forces that continued to threaten human sanity and safety decades after mining. Operations ceased, creating environments where reality itself seemed unstable, while generating psychological hazards that made normal post-war recovery efforts impossible in affected areas. The quarries and mining sites became locations that survivor communities learned to avoid rather than salvage, creating no-go zones that limited resource recovery, while perpetuating the influence of forces that the corporation had released through its reckless excavation activities. The transportation infrastructure that connected these various industrial operations represented a vast network of roads, railways, and distribution facilities that enabled the movement of extracted materials, manufactured goods, and human populations according to corporate scheduling requirements rather than community needs or environmental considerations. This infrastructure was designed to serve industrial efficiency while creating dependencies that made alternative transportation or economic development difficult for communities that were not integrated into corporate supply chains. The environmental degradation that resulted from these combined industrial activities created health hazards and ecological damage that exceeded the remediation capabilities of pre-war government agencies, while generating long-term costs that were systematically externalized onto communities and ecosystems rather than being accounted for in corporate profit calculations. The true costs of industrial production were distributed across entire regions, while the benefits were concentrated among corporate shareholders and executives who lived far from affected areas. The worker safety records maintained by these corporations revealed systematic patterns of injury, illness, and death that were treated as acceptable costs of business operation, rather than problems requiring immediate attention and remediation, creating workplace environments where human life was valued primarily according to its contribution to production goals rather than its inherent worth. The medical and insurance programs that were supposed to protect workers instead served corporate interests by minimizing liability while concealing the true extent of occupational hazards. The post-war legacy of these transportation and mining corporations manifests throughout the American wasteland in the form of contaminated industrial sites, failed infrastructure projects, and abandoned equipment that continue to pose hazards for survivor communities while occasionally providing valuable salvage materials for reconstruction efforts. The knowledge and skills that were developed through pre-war industrial operations remain useful for post-war survival while carrying forward corporate attitudes and practices that prioritize efficiency over human welfare. As we reflect on the complex industrial heritage of pre-war America in the peaceful moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about the appropriate balance between economic development and environmental protection, the moral responsibilities that accompany industrial power, and the long-term consequences that result when corporate profit maximization is allowed to override considerations of worker safety, community welfare, and ecological sustainability. In the gentle quiet of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of understanding in recognizing that industrial progress itself possesses the potential for both beneficial and harmful applications, depending on the values that guide its implementation. While the abandoned mines and factories that dot the wasteland serve as reminders of both human ingenuity and the importance of ensuring that technological advancement serves community flourishing rather than corporate accumulation of wealth and power at the expense of environmental and human health. Among the corporate empires that shaped pre-war American consumer culture and social conditioning, few achieved the systematic transformation of basic human needs into manufactured dependencies as comprehensively as the Coca-Cola Corporation. The beverage giant that evolved from a regional soft drink manufacturer into a multimedia entertainment conglomerate, whose influence extended far beyond simple product sales into the fundamental psychology of American identity and social aspiration. Founded in 2004 by the enigmatic entrepreneur John Caleb Bradburton, Coca-Cola emerged during the early stages of resource scarcity as corporations began recognizing that consumer loyalty and brand identification could provide more reliable revenue streams than traditional manufacturing or service. Industries that were vulnerable to supply chain disruptions and economic instability, Bradburton's vision for Coca-Cola transcended conventional beverage marketing to encompass a comprehensive lifestyle brand that would associate corporate products with American values, personal success, and social belonging in ways that made product consumption feel like patriotic duty rather than commercial transaction. The distinctive bottle design, memorable advertising jingles, and ubiquitous corporate presence that characterized Nuka-Cola's market penetration represented sophisticated applications of psychological manipulation techniques that transformed casual consumers into devoted brand evangelists, whose personal identities became intertwined with corporate messaging and product consumption patterns. The chemical formulation that gave Nuka-Cola its distinctive taste and addictive properties included compounds that had been developed through extensive research into neurology and behavioral psychology, creating beverages that generated genuine physical cravings, while providing temporary mood enhancement that encouraged regular consumption. The addictive characteristics were deliberately engineered rather than accidental byproducts of flavor enhancement, reflecting corporate strategies that prioritized customer retention over public health considerations or ethical marketing practices. The research programs that enabled Nuka-Cola's addictive formulation were conducted through partnerships with pharmaceutical companies and academic institutions that provided access to neurological expertise and human test subjects while maintaining the appearance of legitimate product development rather than systematic manipulation of consumer behavior through chemical dependency. The studies that identified optimal addiction levels and consumption patterns were disguised as market research, while actually serving as behavioral modification programs designed to maximize long-term revenue generation through chemically induced customer loyalty. But the most disturbing aspect of Nuka-Cola's formulation was the incorporation of compounds that enhanced susceptibility to advertising and social pressure, creating neurological conditions that made consumers more likely to respond positively to corporate messaging, while becoming less capable of critical evaluation of product claims or marketing strategies. These psychological effects were subtle enough to avoid detection through casual observation while being sufficiently pronounced to generate measurable increases in consumer compliance and brand loyalty. The marketing campaigns that established Nuka-Cola as America's preferred beverage relied heavily on patriotic imagery and appeals to national identity that associated product consumption with love of country and support for American values during the increasingly tense international environment of the resource wars. Corporate advertisements featured wholesome American families enjoying Nuka-Cola during patriotic celebrations, while implying that beverage choice represented a form of political statement about national loyalty and cultural sophistication. The celebrity endorsement programs that Nuka-Cola developed included arrangements with prominent political figures, military leaders, and cultural icons who promoted corporate products as expressions of their personal values and professional commitments, while receiving substantial financial compensation that was often concealed through complex contractual arrangements. These endorsements created the impression that product consumption was endorsed by trusted authority figures, while obscuring the commercial relationships that motivated their promotional activities. The competitive strategies that Nuka-Cola employed against rival beverage companies included systematic efforts to undermine competitor products through disinformation campaigns, regulatory manipulation, and direct sabotage of manufacturing facilities and distribution networks. The cola wars that characterized pre-war beverage marketing involved corporate espionage and psychological warfare techniques that exceeded normal business competition to encompass activities that bordered on commercial terrorism. The rivalry with Sunset Sarsaparilla represented Nuka-Cola's most sustained competitive campaign, involving multi-year efforts to establish market dominance in the American Southwest through advertising saturation, pricing manipulation, and systematic attempts to disrupt competitor operations while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business competition. The corporate intelligence operations that supported this competition generated detailed profiles of competitor personnel and strategies, while implementing countermeasures designed to prevent effective market penetration. The development of Nuka-Cola Quantum represented Bradburton's most ambitious attempt to create a premium product that would justify higher pricing while providing enhanced addictive properties and psychological effects that would establish permanent customer dependencies. The radioactive isotopes that gave Quantum its distinctive blue glow also generated mild radiation exposure that created physiological changes in regular consumers, while providing temporary energy enhancement that encouraged continued consumption, despite potential health consequences. The research that enabled quantum development was conducted in corporate laboratories that operated with minimal regulatory oversight while pursuing product enhancement through systematic exposure of test subjects to various levels of radioactive contamination. The health effects of regular quantum consumption were systematically concealed through corporate medical programs that attributed radiation-related illnesses to pre-existing conditions, rather than acknowledging the toxic characteristics of corporate products. The Nuka World theme park that served as the ultimate expression of Bradburton's corporate vision represented an attempt to create a controlled environment where brand loyalty could be cultivated through immersive entertainment, experiences that associated corporate products with childhood, memories, and family bonding activities. The park's attractions were designed to reinforce corporate messaging while generating additional revenue streams through admission fees, merchandise sales, and premium product consumption in captive market environments. The construction of Nuka World required enormous investments that were justified through projected revenue from tourism and merchandise sales. But the park also served as a testing ground for psychological manipulation techniques and consumer behavior modification programs that could be applied to broader marketing strategies. The controlled environment enabled systematic study of visitor responses to various forms of corporate messaging, while generating data about optimal methods for inducing brand loyalty and product consumption. The advanced automation systems that operated Nuka World attractions included sophisticated artificial intelligence programs that could analyze visitor behavior while customizing entertainment experiences to maximize psychological impact and commercial effectiveness. These systems collected detailed data about individual preferences and responses while implementing real-time modifications to park experiences that would enhance visitor satisfaction and brand identification. But the most disturbing aspect of Nuka World operations was the systematic collection and analysis of visitor biometric data that enabled corporate researchers to study the physiological and psychological effects of brand exposure while developing enhanced techniques for manipulating consumer behavior through environmental design and sensory manipulation. The park functioned as a massive laboratory for studying human responses to corporate messaging while generating revenue through entertainment services. The preservation technology that enabled Bradburton's survival as a disembodied head in a jar represented the ultimate expression of his identification with corporate success and his inability to conceive of existence apart from business operations and profit generation. The cryogenic systems that maintained his consciousness were powered by Nuka-Cola production facilities while enabling him to continue directing corporate operations despite the death of his biological body. The post-war discovery of Bradburton's preserved consciousness revealed the extent to which corporate leadership had become divorced from normal human experience and moral consideration, creating individuals whose personal identities were so thoroughly integrated with business success that they could not distinguish between corporate welfare and human flourishing. His continued operation of automated production systems decades after civilization's collapse demonstrated the persistence of corporate programming even when its original purposes had become obsolete. The automated Nuka-Cola production facilities that continued operating throughout the post-war period generated enormous quantities of beverages that provided both sustenance and health hazards for survivor communities while demonstrating the resilience of pre-war industrial systems and their ability to function independently of human oversight. The continued production created valuable resources for wasteland communities while perpetuating the addictive dependencies that had characterized pre-war consumption patterns. The bottle cap currency that emerged in post-war America represented one of the most ironic consequences of Nuka-Cola's market penetration, transforming corporate packaging materials into the foundation for survivor economic systems, while demonstrating how thoroughly corporate products had penetrated American society. The universal recognition and relative scarcity of bottle caps made them ideal currency for societies that lacked access to traditional banking systems or government-issued money. The post-war exploration of Nuka World revealed the extent to which the theme park had been designed to function as a self-contained corporate city-state that could maintain operations independently of external support systems, while serving as a showcase for corporate technology and management philosophy. The park's advanced automation and defensive systems enabled it to continue operating decades after the Great War while attracting various groups who sought to control its resources and capabilities. The raider gangs that eventually occupied Nuka World transformed the family-friendly theme park into a violent arena for gladiatorial combat and territorial competition while maintaining many of the park's original entertainment functions in perverted forms that reflected post-war social conditions and moral degradation. The transformation demonstrated how corporate entertainment infrastructure could be adapted for purposes that completely contradicted its original design objectives while retaining its basic operational characteristics. The corporate merchandise and collectibles that Nuka-Cola produced represented efforts to extend brand identification beyond simple product consumption into comprehensive lifestyle integration that made corporate symbols and messaging part of consumers' personal and domestic environments. The toys, clothing, and household items that featured corporate branding created constant reinforcement of brand loyalty while generating additional revenue streams that supplemented beverage sales. The employee loyalty programs that Nuka-Cola implemented for its workforce included comprehensive benefits packages and social activities that were designed to create dependencies that prevented labor organization while fostering identification with corporate objectives that transcended simple employment relationships. The company towns and recreational facilities that served corporate employees created environments where personal identity and professional success became inseparable, while isolating workers from external influences that might encourage independent thinking. The research and development programs that Nuka-Cola pursued in partnership with other corporations included collaborative projects with pharmaceutical companies that sought to enhance the addictive and behavioral modification properties of beverage products while maintaining the appearance of legitimate flavor and nutrition research. These partnerships enabled sharing of neurological and psychological expertise while distributing liability for potentially harmful research activities. The environmental impact of Nuka-Cola production included toxic waste streams from chemical processing and radioactive contamination from quantum manufacturing that were systematically concealed through corporate waste management programs that prioritized cost reduction over environmental protection. The contamination created health hazards for communities surrounding production facilities while generating cleanup costs that were externalized onto government agencies and affected populations. As we reflect on Nuka-Cola's pervasive influence on pre-war American culture in the peaceful moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about the appropriate limits of corporate marketing and product development. the moral responsibilities that accompany the power to shape consumer behavior and cultural values, and the long-term consequences that result when business success becomes disconnected from considerations of public health and social welfare. In the gentle quiet of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of understanding in recognizing that consumer culture itself possesses the potential for both beneficial and harmful applications depending on the values that guide corporate behavior and product development. While the ubiquitous Nuka-Cola bottles and advertisements that persist throughout the wasteland serve as reminders of both human creativity in building brands and communities, and the dangers of allowing commercial interests to override considerations of individual autonomy and public health, the distant fizzing sound of carbonated beverages and the soft glow of neon advertising signs create a nostalgic lullaby that speaks to humanity's enduring desire for comfort and social connection, while highlighting the ease with which corporate entities can exploit these fundamental needs for commercial purposes, creating legacies that persist long after the civilization that supported them has been transformed beyond recognition by the very forces that corporate competition and resource extraction helped unleash upon the world. In the grand theatre of pre-war corporate ambition, where earthbound enterprises pursued ever greater profits through increasingly destructive means, few endeavors captured the profound disconnect between human aspiration and practical capability as completely as the aerospace industry's doomed pursuit of extraterrestrial expansion through Repcon Aerospace and ArcJet systems. These twin monuments to technological hubris emerged during the final decades before the Great War, as corporations and government agencies alike recognized that Earth's dwindling resources and escalating international tensions might necessitate humanity's expansion beyond the confines of its birth planet, creating aerospace programs that promised salvation through escape while delivering only sophisticated weapons systems disguised as peaceful exploration initiatives. Repcon Aerospace established itself as America's premier private space exploration company during the height of the resource wars, positioning itself as the corporate pioneer that would lead humanity's expansion into the solar system, while secretly developing plasma weapons, technology, and propulsion systems that served military objectives rather than genuine scientific exploration. Founded in 2005 as international competition for remaining petroleum reserves reached critical levels, Repcon represented the aerospace industry's attempt to capitalize on growing public interest in space exploration, while pursuing government contracts that provided stable revenue streams independent of civilian market fluctuations. The corporate vision that guided Repcon's development emphasized humanity's destiny among the stars, promoting space exploration as both scientific adventure and practical necessity for ensuring American leadership in an increasingly competitive international environment. The company's promotional materials featured inspiring imagery of American astronauts establishing lunar colonies and Mars settlements, while carefully avoiding discussion of the military applications that justified most of their research and development budgets through Defense Department contracts and classified project funding. The plasma propulsion technology that became Repcon's signature innovation represented genuine breakthroughs in energy manipulation and particle physics that could theoretically enable rapid interplanetary travel, while simultaneously providing the foundation for directed energy weapons that would revolutionize terrestrial warfare. The dual-use nature of plasma technology enabled Repcon to pursue military contracts while maintaining the public appearance of peaceful scientific research, creating corporate revenues that supported both legitimate space exploration and weapons development programs. The research facilities that REPCONN established throughout the American Southwest became centers for advanced physics research that pushed the boundaries of human understanding while serving military objectives that remained classified at the highest levels of government security. The scientists and engineers who worked in these facilities were often unaware of the military applications of their research, believing that they were contributing to humanity's peaceful expansion into space, while actually developing technologies that would make terrestrial warfare more devastating and efficient. The plasma rifle technology that emerged from REPCONN's propulsion research represented one of the most effective directed energy weapons ever developed, creating handheld devices that could deliver devastating amounts of focused energy while requiring minimal ammunition or maintenance compared to conventional firearms. The weapons operated by generating and directing streams of superheated plasma that could melt through most forms of armor and protective equipment, while maintaining accuracy and effectiveness over substantial distances. But the development of practical plasma weapons required extensive testing on both inanimate targets and living subjects to determine optimal power levels, targeting systems, and safety protocols that would enable military deployment without excessive risks to friendly forces. The human testing was conducted through arrangements with military medical facilities and research institutions that provided access to experimental subjects while maintaining the secrecy necessary for classified weapons development programs. The environmental impact of plasma weapons testing included radioactive contamination and atmospheric effects that persisted long after testing programs concluded, creating health hazards for communities near testing sites while demonstrating the inherent dangers of energy weapons that operated through manipulation of fundamental physical forces. The testing sites became permanently contaminated areas that required exclusion zones and long-term monitoring to prevent civilian exposure to dangerous radiation levels. The space program partnerships that REPCONN developed with government agencies provided access to classified research and unlimited funding while serving broader national security objectives that extended beyond simple technological development to encompass intelligence gathering and strategic positioning for potential conflicts with other spacefaring nations. The corporate space program functioned as cover for military activities while generating genuine scientific knowledge that advanced human understanding of space exploration challenges and opportunities. The Bright Brotherhood occupation of REPCONN facilities in the post-war period represented one of the most surreal consequences of corporate space program development, as communities of ghoulified humans interpreted the abandoned aerospace installations as sacred sites that would enable their transcendence to higher planes of existence through rocket-powered pilgrimage to distant worlds. The ghouls' religious devotion to REPCONN's technology demonstrated how technological systems could acquire spiritual significance when their original purposes became obsolete or incomprehensible. The Come Fly With Me expedition that various post-war factions encountered at REPCONN facilities revealed both the potential and limitations of preserved pre-war technology, as the ghouls' attempts to restore rocket systems for interplanetary travel faced technical challenges that exceeded their capabilities, while threatening to create catastrophic failures that could contaminate entire regions with radioactive materials. The expedition represented both hope for transcendence and the dangers of using advanced technology without adequate understanding of its operation and safety requirements. Arc jet systems represented the aerospace industry's more conventional approach to space exploration through government contracts and systematic technology development that emphasized reliability and safety over revolutionary breakthroughs, creating aerospace capabilities that served both civilian and military objectives through methodical advancement of rocket propulsion and spacecraft design. Founded in 2005 as a competitor to Repcon's more radical approach, ArcJet pursued steady technological improvement rather than dramatic innovations that might attract excessive attention or regulatory scrutiny. The Mars colonization program that became ArcJet's primary focus reflected genuine scientific interest in planetary exploration, combined with strategic planning for scenarios where Earth might become uninhabitable due to nuclear, warfare, or environmental collapse. The technical challenges involved in transporting large populations across interplanetary distances required advances in life support systems, radiation shielding, and closed-loop resource recycling that would prove valuable for both space exploration and terrestrial survival applications. The XMB booster technology that ArcJet developed for heavy lift applications represented breakthrough achievements in rocket propulsion that could enable transportation of substantial cargo and personnel loads to orbital stations and planetary colonies, while serving military objectives that required rapid deployment of large payloads to strategic locations. The boosters combined chemical and nuclear propulsion systems to achieve performance levels that exceeded conventional rocket technology while maintaining safety standards that enabled human passenger transportation. But the development of practical interplanetary transportation required enormous investments that exceeded the resources available to private corporations, creating dependencies on government funding that subjected aerospace programs to political pressures and budget constraints that often conflicted with engineering requirements and safety considerations. The result was technological development that served short-term political objectives rather than long-term scientific or exploration goals. The facility construction that supported ArcJet's operations included sophisticated manufacturing capabilities and testing installations that represented some of the most advanced industrial technology available in pre-war America, creating infrastructure that could support complex aerospace projects while serving as models for post-war reconstruction efforts. The automated manufacturing systems could produce precision components with tolerances that exceeded conventional industrial capabilities while maintaining quality control standards that ensured reliability under extreme operational conditions. The corporate rivalry between ArcJet and Repcon reflected broader competition within the aerospace industry for government contracts and public attention, creating competitive pressures that drove technological innovation while encouraging secrecy and corporate espionage that limited knowledge sharing and collaborative development that might have accelerated genuine space exploration progress. The competition for limited funding and resources resulted in duplicated research efforts and proprietary technology development that served corporate interests rather than broader human advancement. The workforce that both aerospace companies employed included some of the most brilliant scientists and engineers in America, individuals whose expertise in physics, chemistry, and materials science represented invaluable human capital that would be largely lost during the Great War's destruction of industrial civilization. The corporate employment practices that attracted and retained this talent included comprehensive benefits, packages, and research opportunities that enabled professional development while serving corporate objectives that often differed from individual career goals and scientific interests. The security protocols that protected aerospace industry research and development reflected the sensitive nature of dual-use technologies that could serve both peaceful exploration and military applications, creating workplace environments where employees operated under strict confidentiality requirements, while often remaining unaware of the full implications of their contributions to corporate projects. The compartmentalization of research activities prevented comprehensive understanding of project goals while maintaining the secrecy necessary for military applications. The international implications of American aerospace development included competitive pressures with other nations that were pursuing similar space exploration and military technology programs, creating strategic dynamics that contributed to the tensions that would ultimately trigger nuclear warfare. The space race served as both peaceful competition and preparation for potential conflicts that would extend beyond Earth's atmosphere to encompass orbital installations and interplanetary territories. The post-war exploration of aerospace facilities revealed the extent to which space program development had been integrated with military planning and weapons research, demonstrating how thoroughly peaceful exploration objectives had been subordinated to defense applications that served immediate strategic goals rather than long-term human advancement. The abandoned facilities contained evidence of research programs that could have revolutionized human capabilities if they had been developed for constructive rather than destructive purposes. The technology recovery efforts that various post-war organizations conducted at aerospace installations provided access to advanced propulsion systems, materials, science innovations, and manufacturing techniques that could support reconstruction efforts, while raising questions about the appropriate applications of technology that had been developed through military funding for potentially destructive purposes. The knowledge contained within aerospace facilities represented both opportunities for advancement and risks of repeating pre-war mistakes. The environmental legacy of aerospace industry operations included contaminated testing sites, toxic waste from advanced materials production, and radioactive areas where experimental propulsion systems had been developed and tested without adequate safety protocols. The cleanup challenges associated with these contaminated sites exceeded the capabilities of post-war communities while creating persistent health hazards that limited land use and resource recovery in affected areas. As we contemplate the aerospace industry's unfulfilled promises in the peaceful moments before sleep, we encounter profound questions about humanity's relationship with technology and exploration, the appropriate balance between scientific advancement and military applications, and the consequences that result when corporate ambitions exceed both technical capabilities and moral constraints that should govern the development of technologies capable of transforming human existence. In the gentle quiet of approaching rest, perhaps we can find some measure of inspiration in recognizing that human curiosity about the cosmos represents one of our species' most noble characteristics. While the abandoned rockets and research facilities that dot the wasteland serve as reminders that technological capability, without wisdom and ethical guidance, can transform dreams of transcendence into instruments of destruction, creating legacies that persist long after the civilizations that created them have been consumed by the very forces that their competitive development helped unleash upon the world. The distant rumble of wind through empty launch gantries creates a melancholy lullaby that speaks to both human aspiration and the tragic gap between our dreams of reaching the stars and our tendency to use the same technologies that could enable cosmic exploration for earthbound conflicts that ultimately consume the very civilizations that developed them, leaving behind only scattered evidence of what might have been achieved if wisdom had guided our technological development toward constructive rather than destructive applications. And so we reach the end of our long journey through the corporate graveyard that stretches across the American wasteland like monuments to ambition without wisdom, profit without conscience, and innovation without moral constraint. From Vault-Tech's underground laboratories of human experimentation to Nuka-Cola's chemical manipulation of consumer behavior, from West-Tech's biological weapons that still stalk the wasteland to the aerospace dreams that crashed before they could lift humanity toward the stars, these corporate titans shaped the world that would ultimately consume them in nuclear fire. The irony persists in every rusted logo and abandoned facility scattered across the wasteland. corporations that promised to solve humanity's greatest challenges instead created the very problems that made survival itself daily struggle. Yet their technologies endure, providing both salvation and damnation to the survivors who inherit their legacy. Stimpaks heal the wounded, while super mutants hunt the innocent. Fusion cores power communities while their weaponized variants level cities. Robots serve as companions and killers with equal mechanical precision. Perhaps the greatest tragedy lies not in the corporations' crimes, but in their squandered potential. The knowledge and resources that could have created paradise instead being channeled toward destruction. The wasteland teaches us that technological power without moral guidance inevitably becomes technological tyranny, consuming both its creators and its victims in endless cycles of exploitation and revenge. Rest now, wanderer, in the knowledge that even corporate empires crumble, leaving only scattered evidence of their ambitions, and the enduring hope that wisdom might yet guide humanity's rebuilding towards something better than what came before.